Chapter 1408. Little Meow looked doubtfully at the two good friends who appreciated each other. It was touched by the great friendship between humans. It was thinking who said that humans were selfish. The two people in front of it were the best proof. I'm very surprised that you didn't bring your infamous sword soldier army with you. Are you afraid that a tall tree will attract the wind? Is it better to be alone with your shameless and wretched sword? Qing Xian really didn't expect that. He knew that the human orthodoxies might not return, but he didn't expect that this guy's direct subordinates didn't follow him. What a cunning thing, knowing that these people wouldn't be of much use in Zhou Xian's chessboard of heaven and earth. It would be better to fight alone. Lu Xiaoyi never lost in words. Swordsmen aren't good at defense. The ones who are really carrying a tortoiseshell are you orthodox Taoists. I once suggested to Qing Yangzi of the Three Pure Ones to bring the name of the Three Pure Ones to Zhou Xian. Yes, he was a little moved, but he didn't know if it would happen in the end. It's a pity that the Three Pure Ones suffered a great loss this time and are short on manpower. Otherwise, what you're seeing now would be me leading the Three Pure Ones army back to Zhou Xian. I'm really looking forward to it. Next time, you know that my childhood dream was to become a great Dharma cultivator, just like the Three Pure Ones. The two people and the cat did not hesitate and began to rise into the sky to leave. Lu Xiaoyi took one last look at this beautiful celestial body and realized that he would never be able to hang it on his belt to ensure its safety at all times. Qing Xian knew what he meant and explained a little in the air. Qing Kong now has 1,500 cultivators who can fight. In addition, there are several Zhuozhou loyalists. Altogether, there are about 3,000 of them. After this battle, the greatest significance will be to boost their morale. They will dare to fight, they can fight, and they will have confidence. We don't have to worry about what happens after that. The 5 rings have been established, and those cultivators who went to the 5 rings will return one by one. In this way, there will be 1 or 2,000 cultivators returning to Qing Sky. More importantly, I have reported the damage to the morale of the entire planet caused by the abandonment of Tai Xianyuan in the Battle of Blue Sky. I believe that the sect will consider the matter seriously. Although he wouldn't send a large number of 5th ring cultivators back to reinforce Azure Sky, he would definitely send some people back to organize Azure Sky's defense. Coupled with the cooperation of the various domains on the left, it was not a problem to defend against the thousands of Buddhist auxiliary forces. Of course, it was a different matter for the main force to attack. We did not let Qing Kong down. However, the safety of Clear Sky depends more on the people living here. This is something that cannot be replaced by others. Lu Xiaoyi nodded. Qing Xian was a reliable person. This was already the best solution, and he should not dwell on it. Qing Xian looked at the swordsman suspiciously after she finished explaining her arrangements. How are we going to go back? Is Lord Tai Pu still here? Will you agree to send us away? Do you have any requests? Why do I feel uncertain when the spiritual treasure system is doing this for us? Can you do it once or twice? Lu Xiaoyi replied naturally, I don't know. We didn't agree when we parted. Do you know that spiritual treasures are not easy to communicate with? If he's not here, he should be, maybe, probably, right? Didn't you fly more than half the distance when you came back? If you really can't, you can lead the way and we can fly back. Qing Xian felt a surge of anger. Indeed, it was such a plaything. He should have known earlier. Little Meow did not know the risks involved. She clapped and laughed. Okay. Little Meow loves long-distance travel. I can see the scenery along the way. With 2 senior brothers around, I don't have to worry about being robbed. Qing Xian slapped her. You like traveling? Long distance? How many years is your journey considered long distance? How many years? More than 10 years? Have you tried flying for 300 years? Turning Little Meow into Old Meow? Turning your black beard into a white one? The 3 of them came out of Clear Sky and met up with the ancient beasts and Marshal Saint Training Hall. They also flew towards Lord Tai Pu's stop. Lu Xiaoyi rubbed Little Meow's head. Don't mind him. That person is traumatized by long-distance travel. If I didn't pull him back then, there would be another interstellar lunatic in the universe. So, what if his beard is white? That's the embodiment of maturity. So what if he's old? That's the symbol of wisdom. Come, senior brother, let me teach you a tongue twister. It'll help you improve your human language skills. Say it with me. Say. A group of white-bearded old men came from the south, holding white crutches and sticks in their hands. Qing Xian sighed at the back as she listened to the tongue-twisting conversation between the human and the cat. Being magnanimous was a very important quality of a cultivator. To put it bluntly, it meant that one should not be stingy. It meant to be drunk in the present. It was a form of self-anesthesia. It could allow a cultivator to overcome loneliness to the greatest extent, whether it was the external loneliness of the void, or more importantly, the inner loneliness of the heart. A person with such quality would never break down, not being invaded by external demons, not losing one's mind. From a certain perspective, it was also a rare Tao heart. The group hurriedly rushed to Lord Tai Pu's stop. Everyone couldn't help but feel a chill in their hearts. That huge meteorite with a unique aura was not here. Did it really leave? Did it return long ago? Or did it just go out for a walk? Everyone's gaze looked over, because it was Lu Xiaoyi who brought everyone up the rock. Of course, they would look for him now. Lu Xiaoyi circled the nearby space a few times. Taiposhi was indeed not here, but he had to show that he was the backbone. It's this space? Did you remember wrongly? Everyone nodded in unison. It's here. It can't be wrong. Lu Xiaoyi spread out his hands in confusion and began to shift the blame. It doesn't make sense. We've already said that this pre-celestial spiritual treasure is also unreliable. Perhaps there's an emergency at home? His wife is giving birth, so he left in a hurry? Qing Xian listened to his nonsense, pretending to be innocent, and all kinds of performances of shifting the blame. He at least knew one thing. At this time, he must not go up and say too much. Otherwise, this fellow would definitely shift the blame to you. Xiang Lu and the other primordial beasts didn't understand this. They were still concerned at the side. General, did Lord Tai Pu feel that we stayed for too long and left alone because he was in a bad mood? Lu Xiaoyi took advantage of the situation. In a bad mood? And that's completely possible. Lu Jun, did you make Lord Tai Pu unhappy when you came here? You know that pre-celestial spiritual treasures have some strange behaviors in certain aspects. Xiang Lu and the other primordial beasts felt wronged. No way. We were very careful when we came. How would we dare to make the pre-celestial spiritual treasure unhappy when it helped us? Lu Xiaoyi didn't believe it. Lord Tai Pu had better be clean. He can't tolerate all kinds of unsightly things. When you came for so many years, did you urinate and defecate everywhere in Tai Pu's territory? Lord Tai Pu didn't say anything, but he must be dissatisfied in his heart. Thus, Jiaoying cried out in grievance. General, you can't accuse a good beast like this. We, the primordial race, have never left our aura casually outside. We're afraid that our opponents will secretly take it and borrow it. Take me, for example. If I have any excretions, I use a special head to open its mouth and take it back. It's self-produced and self-distributed. At the same time, I use my tongue to clean it. If you don't believe me, you can smell it. And it's this snake head. Chapter 1409. P.S. When you see Sloth's words, the double reward has already started. So you can probably guess what Sloth is going to say next. Well, continue to ask for monthly votes. In the last 3 days of this month, the competition for monthly votes will be very fierce, which makes Sloth very nervous. I still have the same request, try to stay in the top 10 of the total list. After all, this is the closest I have gotten in the 3 years of writing. If I miss this opportunity, there won't be another one. So, please help me. My current position may not be safe. Also, I want to remind my friends, in the last 3 days of this month, from 20 to 24 every night, the monthly votes generated from tips are 4 times, so don't miss this window. This is not to ask for tips. Sloth is not that shameless, but for willing friends, it will be more efficient during this period. I wish you a happy reading. Lu Xiaoyi began to think of other ideas after he failed to frame Qing Xian. Little Meow wanted to say something, but its mouth was covered by Qing Xian. Don't talk. Otherwise, He will blame you for shedding your fur. Let's just see how he justifies himself. Lu Xiaoyi glanced at Little Meow, and Little Meow hid behind Qing Xian. It understood that the next reason was that Tai Pujuan was allergic to cat fur, unable to find a scapegoat. Lu Xiaoyi was a little helpless. He looked at the empty sky and could only think of another innate spiritual treasure, the big tree. He was not familiar with Master Guy. When Taiposhi rushed here, they were anxious to save Qing Kong, so they did not have time to exchange pleasantries. Moreover, Master Guy was not a talkative spiritual treasure. In Lu Xiaoyi's opinion, for spiritual treasures, 10 years or more of a human's time was just a nap. It was like telling the driver on a long-distance bus, "I'll be right back after taking a piss." But the old driver, Master Guy Pujuan, left without saying anything, which made him speechless. He came to Master Guy Pujuan and observed for a while, but he could not think of a way to strike up a conversation in a more natural way. Unexpectedly, Master Guy Pujuan, who looked like a piece of dead wood, spoke first. "What are you looking at?" Lu Xiaoyi was very familiar with these words in his previous life, so he subconsciously replied, "What's wrong with looking at you?" Light and shadow crisscrossed, and space changed. Lu Xiaoyi felt an unstoppable force grab him, and in the next moment, he appeared in an indescribable space. In front of him was a tree full of vitality. It was incomparably tall, and it was as thick as a canopy. Lu Xiaoyi was still a little confused. He didn't know whether this tree was good or evil, but his intuition told him that since it was a member of the Heavenly Eyes transmission system, it might be friends with Lord Taipu, so it shouldn't have any inexplicable malice, right? It was Lord Gao Yuejun who spoke first. "Little friend, what brings you here?" As soon as Lu Xiaoyi heard it speak, he had an idea in his heart. If it could call him little friend instead of little thief, then there was a chance. "Hence," he said respectfully, "I'm here to ask about the whereabouts of the Lord of Simplicity who sent us here. Is it a short trip to visit a friend? Or is it somewhere else?" Lord Gao Yuejun answered straightforwardly. Fellow Taoist Tai Pu came to Zhuozhou because he applied for a transfer order and passed by. Now he has gone to his new territory, which is very far away from here. I'm afraid he can't come back. Lu Xiaoyi understood. To avoid suspicion, Lord Tai Pu proposed a long-distance trip to the Heavenly Eye system in the name of a transfer order. Bringing them along would seem like an act of convenience. This way, it could minimize the karma to the greatest extent and prevent people with ulterior motives from using this as an excuse to make trouble. It should be said that these old guys who had lived for millions of years were really very cautious in their actions. They hid their real purpose in a normal transfer order, which was watertight. But the problem was, if it was watertight, how could they go back? In the limited communication with Lord Taipu, although he didn't directly talk about the return trip, they were all in the cultivation world, so there were some things that didn't need to be said clearly. He believed that Lord Taipu could understand, but who knew that it would just leave without a care? Lord Taipu was indeed very helpful, and he was very grateful. But did it think that they wouldn't leave after returning to their hometown? Lord Gao Yuejun said slowly, "Young friend, you have the power of faith, so it's understandable that the spiritual treasure teleportation helps you. But your faith is different from the faith of the Heavenly Eye, so it's not considered orthodox. Young friend, are you willing to join the Heavenly Eye? Naturally, you'll be qualified to use the spiritual treasure teleportation to a certain extent." Lu Xiaoyi wouldn't be willing to join such an inexplicable organization. He couldn't avoid it at all costs. Thus, he laughed dryly and said, "Heavenly Eyes, I'm afraid I won't be able to shoulder such a high and mighty organization that regulates the order of cultivation and maintains the health of the universe." Lord Gao Yuejun laughed. He knew the thoughts of human cultivators too well. "Young friend, don't be in a hurry to refuse. Due to the collapse of the Great Tao and the chaos of the Heavenly Eye system, there are many things that can no longer be hidden from people's eyes. Now, it's no longer a low-key and mysterious organization. Instead, it's become half-hidden, and there aren't many secrets to speak of. The most important reason why humans aren't willing to join is that it will affect the future path of cultivators. This kind of influence did exist 20,000 years ago, but now there are many ways to deal with it. It's no longer an unchangeable iron law. Lord Gao Yuejuan's voice echoed in the space. For example, you have your own faith. Originally, the heavenly I wouldn't accept people like you. Even if it did, it would erase your original faith and replace it with the heavenly I's faith. This is a precedent. But now, it's very difficult for the heavenly I to find people to join. Chaotic times are coming, and everyone is fighting for their own future. How many people are willing to join the ranks of maintaining order? Therefore, the heavenly I's conditions for joining have been relaxed a lot, and it has tacitly allowed cultivators like you to join. This is a change. I'll tell you the truth. Because you have your own faith, the heavenly I's faith may not be able to do anything to you. It can be broken. In other words, you can be in the heavenly I but not be controlled by its faith. Thus, you can obtain the support of the numinous treasure transmission system. This account is still profitable. How about it? Won't you consider it? Lu Xiaoyi still had doubts. If I don't have my own faith, but the faith of the Tao of Faith, then the heavenly I doesn't care? Lord Gao Yuejun was very straightforward. No, the heavenly I only accepts cultivators without faith. Now, it's expanded to also allow cultivators with their own faith. However, the heavenly I will never find cultivators with the Tao of Faith. This is the principle. Seeing Lu Xiaoyi still hesitating, Lord Gao Yuejun sighed. Little friend, you can't escape this hurdle. Because of your outstanding performance in this Taoist and Buddhist struggle in the main world. Do you think you can escape the omnipresent surveillance of the heavenly I? How is that possible? Not only you but also that Qing Xian. He can't escape either. Since you're destined to be unable to avoid it, why not take the initiative? With my introduction, can we still negotiate some conditions? Lu Xiaoyi was stunned. The three pure ones can't escape? Lord Gao Yuejun snorted. Of course, the three pure ones are no exception. But these orthodoxies have long secretly passed down the method to break it, so they don't have to worry about it affecting their Tao path. But let me tell you, the best way to get rid of the influence of the heavenly I's faith is to have your own faith. The three pure ones also walk this path. There are 3 levels of faith, and they are divided into different realms. The highest and most intolerable is your own faith. Next is the faith of the Tao of Faith. The last is the faith of the heavenly I. So you don't have to worry about anything at all. Chapter 1410. Lu Xiaoyi was very curious. Why are you telling me this? I don't seem to be familiar with you. Gao Yuejun sighed in his heart. The reincarnation of the cultivation world was really irresistible, but he had to find a good reason. It was unreasonable that he couldn't understand the key point that Tai Pu Jun could understand. It was related to the change of the universe and the change of the epoch. Even primordial spiritual treasures had to act cautiously. They could not participate, but they couldn't interfere too deeply. They had to be neither friendly nor distant, so they could protect themselves at the last moment. Not to mention how much they could gain, at least they still had the right to survive. For all spiritual treasures, they actually didn't know how much the change of the epoch would affect them. There was a saying that primordial spiritual treasures might be more affected than acquired spiritual treasures in the change. This was also the reason why Tai Pu Jun and Gao Yuejun didn't want to stay out of it. Especially Gao Yuejun, it had another layer of karma, one that it didn't dare to mention to outsiders. Therefore, it had to pull this human into the heavenly eyes. This was also its responsibility to guard this place. With the heavenly eyes as a cover, its next actions would be more natural and flawless. Of course, the problem of belief was not a problem at all. When that guy came here more than 10,000 years ago, he also had his own belief. What could the heavenly eyes do to him? In the end, it didn't even dare to fart. Tai Pu Jun and I are old friends. He came to this universe before, so we know each other. Numinous treasures could not lie, but they could choose to say or not. Lord Tai Pu had indeed been here before, because he had taken a fancy to this universe. However, with the tree around, it could not be easily changed. This was because numinous treasures had the rules of the numinous treasure system. Tai Pu Jun's transfer request had been put forward more than 10,000 years ago, but it was approved recently. In view of their long lifespan, the efficiency of the spiritual treasure system was determined. Tai Pokakuin was very experienced throughout the entire process. Not even a drop of water leaked out. He went through the procedures according to Heaven's Eye's rules without anyone knowing. It was just a remote transfer, and he conveniently brought a group of people over. Why did he succeed at this moment? Of course, Gao Yuejun added fuel to the fire behind the scenes. At the same time, he roped in another Khanate numinous treasure that was unwilling to be left out and completed a complicated change of personnel and territory. Innate spiritual treasures were usually very lazy. They wouldn't easily request for a change of defense. Lord Taipu had been delayed for tens of thousands of years because of this. It was only recently that Lord Taipu completed the change with the help of Lord Taipu. The final result was that Lord Taipu went to another innate spiritual treasure's airspace. That innate spiritual treasure would come to Zhuozhou Xian. Lord Taipu, on the other hand, secretly achieved his goal. He went to Zhou Xian, the place closest to the Heaven's Choice mainland, to stand at the heart of the storm. The three honest natural spiritual treasures completed all of this in a tacit agreement, both for the sake of their past worries and for the sake of dealing with the change of eras. Lord Taipu asked me to bring you back to Zhou Xian if you need it, but I'm different from it. My cultivation level is higher, so the Heavenly Eye's requirements for me are also stricter. Don't be overly afraid of joining the Heavenly Eye. In history, many outstanding cultivators joined us, but didn't they also become immortals and saints? Moreover, you only see the disadvantages but not the benefits. When you take root in the Heavenly Eye and make a certain contribution, you'll have the right to freely use the numinous treasure transportation system. Think about it. You will be able to go to any realm in any universe without any obstacles. What does this mean for you? And with the help of us old friends, yes, new friends, it's equivalent to you understanding the interstellar star charts of countless universes. There are many benefits. As for the possible missions of the Heavenly Eye, what's so difficult for a cultivator like you? The benefits were very tempting, but Lu Xiaoyi was never a person who acted based on the benefits. His biggest goal was to bring his friends back the same way he brought them. But with his current ability, he couldn't do it. Not to mention Ain's spirit-perfected monarch. Even a primordial spirit Yang spirit couldn't do it. And he really needed the ability to travel freely in the universe. He had had enough of the method of determining the coordinates one by one in Zhou Xian. It was a waste of time and effort. And that was only near Zhou Xian. If he expanded the range slightly, even if he had the ability of Sun Wukong, who could grab a handful of hair and make 10,000 Lu Xiaoyi appear, he still couldn't do it. He had a lot of scruples. Originally, his biggest concern was that it would affect the upper realm. Now, it seemed that he, who had independent belief, could ignore the belief of the Heavenly Eye, so the only thing left was, will there be many missions of the Heavenly Eye? Gao Lian heaved a sigh of relief. This little guy was still very difficult to deal with. Now was not the same as before. Cultivators had many sources of information and knew a lot of things. They couldn't lie. Innate numinous treasures never lie. We may not say it. We may cut off the beginning and the end. We may take things out of context. We may be vague. But we will never make up stories. I once met a cultivator, a very promising one, who later became an immortal. In less than 1,000 years after he became a Heavenly Eye and grew to become a half-immortal, he received no more than 10 missions. On average, it was once every 100 years. Most of the time was less than 10 years, and most of the time was spent on the road. So tell me, is this kind of mission very frequent? Lu Xiaoyi sighed. That was a time of peace and prosperity. Now, it was a time of chaos. How could it be compared? In this cultivation world, there was nothing for free. In fact, he was a little flattered by the Heavenly Eye system's inexplicable kindness to him, because he couldn't pay the equivalent. Lord Taipu and Lord Gao Lian both openly and secretly urged him to join the Heavenly Eye system. Lord Taipu even showed his sincerity in advance by escorting them all the way from Zhou Xian to Qingkong. Now that he wanted to go back, how could he not pay a price? If it was another responsibility of the Heavenly Eye system to search for capable people from all over the universe, he didn't mind helping them. This was the way to get along with cultivators. He wasn't afraid of doing missions. What he was afraid of was running around aimlessly on the road like a headless fly. Okay, I agree to join the Heavenly Eye system. What's the procedure? Oath, blood, proof of allegiance? Lord Gal Yen became serious. I can only report your information now and get the approval of the Lord Taipu. Then I can issue an order and send down faith. When your faith responds and the Heavenly Eye confirms it, you will become a real member of the Heavenly Eye system. But we can make use of the time difference. Anyway, I'm going to Zhou Xian, so we can complete the procedure on the way. It won't be considered abusing official authority for personal gain. Anyway, you're on the Heavenly Eye's observation list. It's only a matter of time before you pass. Chapter 1411. You're going to Zhou Xian too? Or is it convenient? Lu Xiaoyi felt like he had been cheated. Lord Gai said seriously, I'm going to Zhou Xian to take over the duties of Lord Taipu. Isn't it convenient? Lu Xiaoyi was speechless. He couldn't even say anything. He had already said it before. He might have cut out the beginning and the end, or taken things out of context. What left a deep impression on him was the coordination between these pre-celestial spiritual treasures. They brought a large group of people here and there without any karma at all. As expected, millions of years were not for nothing. They were also considered old foxes in the system. Everyone in the void kept waiting silently. The ancient beasts were a little anxious, and those in the Martial Saint Training Hall were also a little impatient. However, Qing Xian stopped them from doing anything. Just wait, that guy won't die. Lord Taipu could bring us back from 100 million miles away. This shows that there is a tacit understanding between the spiritual treasures. It's just a matter of time and whether the price can be negotiated or not. Little Miao asked, Senior Brother Qing Xian, I've been reading about supernatural things recently. Among them, there's a kind of tree demon. Would it capture Senior Brother to be a gigolo or something? Qing Xian nodded. It's very possible. As long as your Senior Brother can achieve his goal, he definitely won't mind selling that. Later, when he walks out, will he walk with the 8 characters? Or will he lean against the wall? Then you'll basically know the secret behind it. Before he finished, a head popped out from the big tree. It was like a big tree tumor. It shouted proudly at everyone, get on the ship. Prepare to set off. The cultivators didn't hesitate, because they had already gotten used to the magic of the military lord. Everything seemed to become simple when it came to him. There was nothing he couldn't do. Who could use the Heavenly Eye's spiritual treasure transportation system? They didn't even dare to think about it. But when it came to him, it seemed to be natural. Qing Xian also shook his head. Different people had different lives. If he wanted to go home, he could only fly by himself. But he had a spiritual treasure to send him home. He didn't know why. This person looked like a heartless ghost on the outside, but in the depths of the darkness, there seemed to be a perilous situation. It was a huge secret. Actually, at this very moment, the battle between Taoism and Buddhism, the collapse of the Grand Tao, and the changes in the era weren't important to him anymore. On the contrary, the more important thing was that it was more challenging to uncover the secrets of this person. After tens of thousands of years of silence, the tree that had always been motionless like a dead tree began to show signs of moving, and it was moving faster and faster. At the same time, a similarly huge fellow floated over from afar. That was a majestic and lofty treasured ship. Tens of thousands of cabins were brightly lit, a perfect combination of power and beauty. The 2 innate spiritual treasures brushed past each other. Their consciousnesses vanished as soon as they touched each other, parting ways tacitly. This was a meeting between the successor and the successor, but there was not much communication between them, because they had known each other for far too long. Lord Big Tree opened a window and let the image of a guy who was picking his nose indecently appear in the consciousness of the primordial spiritual treasure. For a moment, tens of thousands of lights on the huge treasure ship flickered. After a long while, everything returned to normal. Then, there was a deep and distant sigh due to the difference in their cultivation levels. The giant tree, who had a half-immortal body, flew even faster. Lu Xiaoyi learned from Lord Gao Yuejun that their journey this time would only take about 10 years. This was simply unimaginable in the past. Where's Wen Ji? I don't think I saw him? Qing Xian asked casually. Lu Xiaoyi shrugged. He wants to stay in the fifth ring to preach Taoism. You know, this old Taoist is very stubborn. He always has his own ideas. Qing Xian didn't care. This is a mysterious person. I guess it's not as simple as preaching Taoism. Actually, it doesn't matter. This is not only an era of the collapse of the Grand Tao, but also an era of the collision of ideas. Let him be. What can one person do? Lu Xiaoyi really wanted to ask the three pristines about how to deal with the issue of faith. At the same time, he also wanted to remind this Taoist to pay attention to the heaven's eyes. However, after much hesitation, he didn't say anything. It was not that he didn't want to help his friend, but for such a mysterious matter, it was best to leave it to the cultivators themselves. If he really told him, would he be able to avoid it? On the contrary, it would only increase his troubles. People like them didn't need the protection of others. Facing it alone was the reason why they kept getting stronger. He was confident that he could handle the challenge of the Heaven's Eyes mission. Why would he think that Qing Xian couldn't? Do you still remember that Daoist Sanjiu from the Taiching sect? I've already killed him, as per your request. Lu Xiaoyi nodded. That was a grudge that happened in Qingkong Wasteland. It was related to two of his Jin Dan friends. When they entered the space crack, they were ambushed by this person. In fact, it was also related to Qing Xian. This wasn't a matter of one person, but of two people. Qing Xian was very calm. She had already started to consider the problem of reaching Zhou Xian. When we reach Zhou Xian, you'll disperse the primordial beasts and the group of martial saints, right? They are all from the Heaven's Choice. Now is not the time to openly provoke the main force of the Heaven's Choice. So in the end, only you and I are going to challenge the Heaven and Earth chessboard. Do you have any plans? Lu Xiaoyi was very curious. With you around, what do I plan to do? Just think of a way. Something safer. Something less strenuous. It's best if we can walk in openly. Qing Xian decisively shut up. She couldn't afford to be hurt. Little Miao interrupted. Senior martial brother. What about me? Qing Xian went straight to the point. You go back to Miao Planet. This trip is already very long for you. Zhou Xian is not a tourist attraction. And in the process of going in, we can't guarantee your safety. Little Miao was very puzzled. Aren't we going to walk in openly? Lu Xiaoyi laughed loudly. Qing Xian sighed. The two of them were like big shopkeepers. This was because of their personalities. A person who did things cautiously and planned well, when your companions were careless and heartless, you automatically took all the responsibility. These two heartless fellows, one ran to play with the primordial beasts, the other found a quiet place to sleep, leaving Qing Xian alone to uncontrollably deduce all kinds of possible scenarios, environments that could be borrowed, the boundary distribution of Zhou Xian's outer space, more than 10 years. Slowly think about it. Lu Xiaoyi found a tree branch and used both hands as pillows, swaying in the air. Of course, he was not sleeping. Instead, he was recalling his gains and losses in the past 700 years, reflecting on himself and making plans for the future. He had always liked that kind of carefree cultivation life. On this point, the carefree tour was very suitable for him. But to be honest, although the past 700 years were spent in fear, there were many opportunities and his progress was not bad. Now that he suddenly had some free time, his heart really felt a little empty. But when a person lost pressure, he also lost motivation. In fact, it was not necessarily a good thing. Chapter 1412. Lu Xiaoyi immersed his mind into Xuanyuan's scabbard. It was time to systematically familiarize himself with the essence of Xuanyuan's swordsmanship. His current swordsmanship was similar to the Crow ancestors' great Tao of simplicity. However, The Crow ancestors' great Tao of simplicity was the simplest after reaching the deepest level of complexity. It was a kind of enlightenment after seeing the mountains and rivers. It was a natural process. On the other hand, his great Tao of simplicity was originally simple. He did not see much of the mountains and rivers before he started to draw out the essence. This was an incomplete great Tao of simplicity. It was flawed. From complexity to simplicity, the most important thing was the process. Complexity was a must. It was a necessary step, not something that could be simplified. This was the reason why his swordsmanship was not good enough in front of the Crow ancestor. Due to his talent, he could always discover the truth in the shortest amount of time. However, he had lost the process of summarizing the complexity and saving the essence. In fact, this process could not be omitted. It was related to a cultivator's vision. When facing opponents, especially opponents from different orthodoxies, it was necessary to be a little complicated. Not everyone was like the Crow ancestor. They advocated simple and sharp attacks that penetrated the essence. This was what he needed to make up for now. 9 Ben Stream Spectrum, Sword of Fallen Stars, Perception Illumination, Reverse Light of Dust, Reincarnation God Slaying Technique, Dian Sword Rule, Yin-Yang Annihilation Technique, Lawless, 3 Lives, 3 Cleaves, River Sword Tome, Minor, Heavenly Sword Formation, Inch of Time, World's End Near Hand Sword, Body Sword Technique, Inverse Dragon, Chaotic Heavenly Heart Sword, Sword of the 5 Elements, Sword of Power, Reversal of the Universe, River of Sunset, Kuei Do, Greater Teleportation, Lesser Teleportation, Nascent Piercing Body, Cosmic Wind, 3 Provinces, Sword Aura Yellow Sprout, Eternal Night Sword Incantation, Great Sword Circle, Small Sword Circle, Immortal Sword. These should be Xuanyuan swordsmanship that stopped before the Crow ancestor. There was also a portion that came after. They were the top swordsmanship that the Crow ancestor collected from various places. Among them, there was a special mention of a place, Western Bright Sword Mansion. It was the cornerstone of the Crow ancestors' Tao sword lineage. However, Lu Xiaoyi discovered that the heavenly phenomenon sword technique wasn't among them. Most likely, one wouldn't be able to comprehend it unless one was a half-immortal. Or perhaps, a place like the scabbard couldn't contain such a sword technique. This was a sea of swordsmanship. Even with Lu Xiaoyi's insight, he could not help but sigh at the senior's ingenuity in swordsmanship. At his level, with his talent in swordsmanship, he did not need to study the details of every move. The main thing was the essence of the Tao state, the expansion of understanding, the exchange of ideas, and the fusion of inspiration and accumulation. This was the foundation of a great inheritance. It was the cornerstone of Xuanyuan's sword sect. He should have come in to observe and learn these things when he was forming his nascent soul and becoming a monarch. However, because he was far away, he only came in contact with them now. It should be said that as a senior Yang spirit, Guandu's insight was impeccable. He saw through Xuanyuan's swordsmanship at a glance. That was why he gave Xianyuan the scabbard. Lu Xiaoyi threw himself into the sea of swordsmanship.
For him, this was a rare free time.
Previously, there were many battles. In the future, when he entered Zhou Xian, he might not be idle. This kind of opportunity was rare for him. Therefore, he really didn't mean to make things difficult for Qing Xian. In his opinion, there was no use in thinking so much. There would be a way. When the car reaches the mountain, when the boat reaches the bridge, it will naturally cross the bridge. What could the 3 of them, including Little Miao, discuss? There was an old saying that 3 cobblers are better than Zhuge Liang. This saying was wrong. The real situation was that 3 cobblers added together was still 1 cobbler. Vaguely feeling that a few years had passed, Lu Xiaoyi, who was immersed in swordsmanship, suddenly felt something in his heart. He felt that some kind of mystery was about to land in the depths of his soul, but it couldn't because an independent consciousness was resisting, not accepting the sudden and unfamiliar arrival of such a thing. That was a kind of belief, sacrifice. It was indeed sacrifice. This was also the most convenient belief for Tian Mao to control his subordinates. It could satisfy the noble sense of responsibility of cultivators for the whole universe and mankind. Wen Ji once said that this was the first influence of Tian Mao on the cultivators below. If they couldn't even make a sacrifice, then they didn't agree with Tian Mao's belief. Naturally, they couldn't talk about joining Tian Mao. The belief of sacrifice was coming in, but the independent belief was pushing it out. Lu Xiaoyi was very clear that Lord Gao Yuejun didn't lie to him. If he refused, the belief of sacrifice would definitely not come in. But if he didn't have this belief, would Tian Mao accept him? He had already troubled the innate spiritual treasure twice and owed it 2 big favors. This wasn't his style. He also knew that even if he really refused, the tree would still send them back to Zhou Xian. It wouldn't just leave them halfway. But what about the future? There was no future. There was only one way, which was to change and assimilate this belief of sacrifice. Just like what Crow Ancestor did, he changed the belief of sacrifice into something that belonged to him. Crow Ancestor changed the belief of sacrifice into greed. Then what about him? He wasn't too sure. He could only try. Fortunately, the independent belief was the highest level of belief. He had the ability to reject or accept in the end. It was an active change, not a passive one. Under such a dilemma, he began to change his belief with difficulty. He tried many methods, such as arousing other hidden beliefs in the depths of his soul, or finding another belief that was more suitable for him. In such efforts, he persisted for a year, but he still couldn't find any satisfactory belief that could maintain his independence and make Tian Mao accept. He finally understood that faith was not something that could be born out of thin air just by imagining it. It came from the accumulation of a cultivator in the long process of cultivation. It was there, and you couldn't get rid of it even if you wanted to. No matter how much you think or change it, it was useless. He didn't have the conditions to establish a new belief at all. It was determined by his state of mind, experience, outlook on the universe, outlook on life, outlook on cultivation, and many other factors. It needed to be settled, to be refined, and to be formed in adversity. He was still hesitating, but the consciousness of Tian Mao was obviously very dissatisfied with his hesitation. Suddenly, the power of the belief of sacrifice increased greatly, and it was about to force its way in. In an instant, Lu Xiaoyi made the most instinctive reaction: resistance. No matter what happened, his principles would never change. Even if he offended the spiritual treasure system, he would firmly defend his independent belief. Even death couldn't stop him from persevering. His persistence made his independent belief and Tian Mao's belief of sacrifice fiercely collide and intertwine. In the end, he didn't drive away the belief of sacrifice that suddenly increased, but he didn't lose his independent belief either. Instead, he reached a wonderful balance. He could feel that the belief of sacrifice no longer increased his strength. It seemed that Tian Mao had tacitly accepted his current belief state. It accepted him as a member of Tian Mao. Looking back at his belief, it was still an independent belief, but it had become willing to sacrifice for independence? What kind of religion is this? Chapter 1413. Congratulations! You've successfully fooled Heaven's eyes. Lord Great Tree's voice sounded. It was very gratified that the little guy had finally done it. Otherwise, he wouldn't know how to face it. If he hadn't succeeded, his 2 spiritual treasure friends would definitely blame him, right? Blame him for pulling him into Heaven's eyes too early instead of waiting for the right time to mature. Lu Xiaoyi smiled bitterly. So, I've already joined Heaven's eyes. Lord Great Tree was very sure, yes. I saw your name list from the Grand Monarch. In other words, our current transfer is completely reasonable and legal. It's within the scope of Heaven's Eyes authority. Lu Xiaoyi asked, the mission time isn't fixed? Is there a requirement for completion? Lord Great Tree explained, Heaven's Eyes missions naturally take into account the Heaven's Eyes cultivator's actual ability and distance. For example, you, a newcomer and a Yin spirit, won't be assigned a mission beyond your ability. From my personal experience, there's still a buffer period. The principle of missions is to go from easy to difficult. The more missions you complete, the higher the quality, and the higher your rank in Heaven's Eye will be. Relatively speaking, you'll be able to obtain more rights, and in the end, you'll even be able to use Heaven's Eye's teleportation system without any obstacles. Lu Xiaoyi smiled. Well, if there's a favor, it can actually be used? Lord Great Tree didn't evade. Outside of the law, there's nothing more than a favor. No reward? Like Ziqing or something. Lu Xiaoyi still had a glimmer of hope. Lord Great Tree said righteously, talking about Ziqing, talking about resources and benefits, don't you think it's an insult to faith? Of course, if you complete the mission exceptionally well, Heaven's Eyes will also have appropriate rewards in the future. For example, giving you another faith? Lu Xiaoyi shook his head. Then forget it. Just fool around. I don't want to climb up in Heaven's Eyes anyway. For independence, he would rather sacrifice himself? This strange faith was what Lu Xiaoyi wanted to study next. Was it a mixed faith? Or was it a dual faith? Was there a master and follower? To him, he would rather not sacrifice himself for any reason. In the cultivation world, staying alive was more important than anything else. But at the same time, he also knew that if something really affected his independence, he would probably fight to the death. It was very contradictory. With such a modified version of faith, he tested it out and found that its effectiveness in breaking through defenses was around 15%. Its effectiveness was below that of double faith, but above that of single faith. Moreover, it was still mainly independent. In other words, if it wasn't for the fact that it was a test of his independence, he wouldn't have to think about the issue of sacrifice. For a person like him, his understanding of independence was very diverse and broad. For the sake of eternal independence in the future, he could even sacrifice his current independence. In that case, sacrifice meant nothing to him. More than 10 years passed by in a hurry. The starry sky outside the big tree occasionally started to look familiar, especially to Qing Xian, who had been on this route for 300 years. Almost there, the two of them stood at the top of the tree and felt a little emotional. Neither of them were very competent spies, nor did they have the intention to completely destroy the target they were spying on. Instead, because of the long time they spent together, they had more or less developed feelings for each other and were willing to do something for the target. This was something they had in common. Whether it was Qing Xian to the Three Pure Ones or Lu Xiaoyi to Xianyuan, they didn't hide their inclinations and didn't care about what their original sect would think. This was also one of the reasons why they could become friends. I've been thinking, let's not talk about the immemorial beasts. This time, Buddhism brought Zerg and the winged men to attack Taoism. Would it be a challenge to the human order in the main world? This is a very obvious mistake. Those Buddhist monks couldn't have thought of this. Then, why did they still do it? Aren't Buddhism afraid of becoming the public enemy of mankind? Qing Xian asked a question that he had been thinking about for a long time. Lu Xiaoyi thought for a while. There are a few aspects. First of all, Buddhism has always been an orthodoxy that teaches regardless of race, at least in terms of Buddhism. So, no matter what race, it doesn't go against Buddhism's purpose to rope in people. They can use the saying that all life is equal as an excuse. Qing Xian nodded in agreement, yes, on the surface. But in reality, Buddhism's so-called equality is inferior to Taoism. At the very least, Taoism doesn't want to turn them all into Taoist disciples. Buddhism, on the other hand, wants to turn the entire universe into a world of Buddhism. They call this conversion. You and Buddha are fated, and Taoism is dirty. Lu Xiaoyi smiled. The most important thing is the restart of the era. In theory, this point in time is not only the restart of the universe's nature, but also the restart of all life. Why must humans be the mainstream? Are they the rulers? Maybe after the restart of the era, it will be Zerg's world? The heavenly axiom will redistribute resources. For example, making Zerg smarter, making it harder for humans to reproduce, and when some basic attributes start to change, it will actually determine the general direction of the universe after the restart of millions of years. From this point of view, it's understandable for Buddhism to rope in a few more races. We still don't know who will be the master of the world in the future. Qing Xian didn't agree with this person's whimsical thinking. If you put it that way, I'm more inclined to believe that Buddhism saw the threat of Zerg and the Winged Man, so they incited them to come out and destroy them in an organized and planned way. This might also be a change that conforms to the general trend of the human world. Lu Xiaoyi retorted, "The main thing is to destroy Taoism, okay? Exterminating insects is just a matter of convenience." This also explains why Buddhism is unwilling to fight and retreated so easily. It's because they didn't have the intention to solve the conflict between orthodoxies in the main world in one battle. They're very smart and know that this kind of thing can't be rushed. Qing Xian disagreed, but they didn't want to retreat from the beginning. If there were no reinforcements, if the immemorial sacred beast hadn't betrayed us, the fifth ring might not have been able to survive this disaster. Lu Xiaoyi chuckled. "There won't be much loss. It won't be to the extent that it will hurt you, because you Taoists might not have persisted after Xuanyuan's attack failed. If you can give up Qing Kong, why wouldn't the fifth ring? Where there's life, there's hope. This is an unchanging truth in the hands of Taoists." Qing Xian retorted, "Xuanyuan would have attacked? Not necessarily, right? They've been outside the vast ocean nebula for so long, which means that the higher-ups of the sword vein aren't interested in a desperate attack. It's just a show of fighting. Can you bury all the elites in a battle that's destined to be destroyed? Therefore, the fifth ring wouldn't be destroyed, because it could be abandoned." This was the principle that the two of them had clarified in their mutual attack. This wasn't a war in the mortal world, so there was no such thing as a final base. Once out in the universe, the world was vast and boundless. Therefore, Buddhism never had the idea of deciding the universe in one battle. It couldn't be decided. Chapter 14:14. While the two were bickering, the last part of the journey came. Lord Song stopped when they were a few months away from Zhou Xian. As they moved forward, the number of Heaven's Choice cultivators gradually increased, and they would no longer be able to conceal their approach. Everyone left the space of the tree and reluctantly said their goodbyes. This was their last goodbye. They had experienced it many times before, but they still felt sad, because a group operation like this would probably not happen again in the future. Lu Xiaoyi said to Long Xing, "If you want to return to Heaven's Choice, the best way is to follow the immemorial beasts through the ancient beast passage. Pay attention to the changes in the Battle of Zhou Xian that might affect your situation. The path of cultivation is difficult. Take care." The Martial Saint Training Hall had their own thoughts, and they were different from others. This was the privacy of every orthodoxy and could not be described in detail. The immemorial beasts came to say goodbye. They did not mind, because they had a long lifespan, and because Lu Xiaoyi would definitely enter Heaven's Choice again and go through the ancient beast passage. "Next time you come to Heaven's Choice, don't pretend to be mysterious. We will prepare the most honorable welcome ceremony for you among the immemorial beasts, and there will be the most beautiful snake lady in the beast territory." Lu Xiaoyi had to reject the immemorial beast's good intentions and reminded them, "Especially pay attention to your relationship with the dragon race. It is the key to whether you can get along well with the sacred beasts." In the end, there were only two people and a cat left in the sky. As for little Meow, the two did not deliberately drive it away. First of all, this little guy had nowhere else to go. It had been a lonely cat for a long time, and it had already let its heart go wild after coming out for so many years. It really wanted to see the changes in the human cultivation world. Little Meow had its own unique ability, and this ability could sometimes provide help to the two, so they just let it be. They cupped their hands at the tree, and the three figures disappeared into the vast universe. Lu Xiaoyi naturally flew behind Qing Xian, and Little Meow followed behind Lu Xiaoyi with ease. Qing Xian found that no matter how fast or slow it was, it could not change the nature of its lead, and it was a little annoyed. "You two shameless things, do you think it's my business alone to barge in?" Lu Xiaoyi remained silent. Little Meow shut her lips tightly, and Qing Xian's long face fell as they stopped their escape. This was because there was already a hazy fluctuation of spiritual vigor in front of them. This meant that they had already reached the alert area of the Zhou Xian battlefield. If they continued to move forward, it would be difficult for them to not reveal their whereabouts. Lu Xiaoyi grabbed Meow Meow behind him. Meow Meow, it's time for you to do something.
Come and take a look.
See clearly what's up ahead. Little Meow's face was bitter. Senior brother, I can't see that far. Zhou Xian definitely can't see that far. He can only see a little further than you guys, so he can roughly distinguish the distribution of spiritual vigor in front. To be able to see further than them, this was a skill. Lu Xiaoyi and Qing Xian were the top choices among the Yin's spirit supremes of the same level. Lu Xiaoyi was now able to fight against the primordial spirit supremes, and he could also deal with the yang spirit. Qing Xian was slightly weaker, but not by much. Their spiritual power was outstanding among the cultivators of the same level, so Little Meow said that they could see further than them. This was not an ordinary supernatural power. At least in terms of depth of vision, they had already reached the level of the yang spirit. Heaven did not give it abnormal combat power, but gave it a certain amount of compensation in other aspects. In fact, neither Lu Xiaoyi nor Qing Xian intended to sneak in. This was too unreliable. The cultivator legions had always attached great importance to their own protection. The sentries and guerrilla scouts they sent out must have a set of strict distinguishing systems. Moreover, it must be a multi-layered distinguishing system that came from the hands of the yang spirit. It was very difficult to impersonate them through questioning, soul-searching, or other self-righteous methods. You might think that you have been able to pass off fish eyes as pearls, but in fact everything was under the surveillance of others. By the time you finally reacted, you would have already fallen into an inescapable net and would not be able to escape even if you had wings. Regarding this, the 5-ring cultivators had already done it to the extreme. The system of natural selection might not be as professional as the 5-ring cultivators, but it would not be too bad. It was completely uncontrollable. The sentry posts would be filled with layers and layers of questions. After passing through one level, there would be another. In the end, it was almost inevitable that they would be intercepted. Therefore, the two of them were actually very consistent in their opinions, forced their way through. As long as they were fast enough, as long as they could distinguish the fluctuations of the opponent's breath in front of them and avoid the densest areas, it was impossible to completely cover the entrance and exit of such a large upper realm of Zhou. Especially with Little Meow's long-range eye of truth, they had the possibility of changing directions in advance. With their abnormal speed, it was not difficult for them to break into the chessboard of heaven and earth. What made the two of them uncertain was the change after entering the chessboard of heaven and earth. Was it a one-person game? Or a 3-person game? Or did they break into someone else's game? They each had the sex talisman of carefree travel and Taishan Zhonghuang on them. The chessboard of heaven and earth should not have mistaken them for someone else, right? They would not consider things that could not be predicted. Breaking into a certain game was their goal. When they reached it, they would naturally find out. They were not important people. Zhou Xian would not open up a passage for them alone. It was also unrealistic. Lu Xiaoyi put Little Meow on Qing Xian's shoulder. This way, Qing Xian could share the eye of truth with Little Meow. He only needed to follow Qing Xian. The two of them could not share the eye of truth. Otherwise, with their different temperaments and ways of doing things, they would not be able to persuade each other to go their separate ways. Between the two of them, Lu Xiaoyi's speed was faster. Therefore, he could only follow while Qing Xian led the way. If it was another person, Qing Xian might not be able to keep up with them. Qing Xian specially reminded Little Meow, "Little Meow, after we reach Zhou Xian's boundary, I will put you into the spirit beast pouch. Be careful not to resist." Little Meow nodded obediently. This was to prevent the chessboard of heaven and earth from separating the cat and human after entering it. If they were placed into different games, with Little Meow's ordinary yuanying ability, it would most likely be a disaster. When everything was ready, Qing Xian and Little Meow shared their vision. They had a rough judgment of the distribution of the scouts in front of them. With a flash of their bodies, they aimed at the huge gap between the heaven's chosen people and went in. Lu Xiaoyi followed closely behind. With this kind of penetration, as long as the route was chosen appropriately, it would not even alarm the other party. This was because the arrangement of the heaven's chosen people would not be able to form some kind of airtight seal over a distance of a few months. They relied on judgment, courage, and adaptability. In this point, Qing Xian had no problem. After a month, there was finally a heaven's chosen cultivator who noticed the three of them flashing past. Therefore, the alarm was sent out and the surrounding interception system began to move. The real test had arrived. Lu Xiaoyi was making sarcastic remarks at the back. "Run faster, cow nose. Do you believe that I won't kick your butt if you dilly-dally?" Chapter 14-15. Zhou Xian's heaven and earth chessboard had never stopped since it started 70 years ago. Counting the three innate spiritual treasures in the dozens of universes around Zhou Xian, the heaven and earth chessboard was ranked first in terms of realm aura. This was also one of the important reasons why the upper realm of Zhou Xian would merge with the heaven and earth chessboard. The heaven and earth chessboard's functions were abnormally powerful, but the price was that it lost the development of a deeper level of self-intelligence. Instead, it was replaced by various chessboard rules, faintly forming a small heavenly Tao under the heaven and earth chessboard. Such a level could no longer be categorized using the human realm. If one had to find a standard, it would be between the half-immortal realm and the celestial realm. As the celestial realm and the celestial realm were deeply integrated with each other, all attacks on the celestial realm would be distributed to every piece of land in the celestial realm. Even if the Heaven's Choice army covered the entire place and attacked at the same time, they wouldn't be able to shake the heaven and earth chessboard in the slightest. They couldn't help but fall into an endless and never-ending game. Using spells could not cause any substantial damage to Zhou Xian, so the Heaven's Choice people could only break through this unsolvable chessboard formation through human means. They broke through it one by one. However, the heaven and earth chessboard was not unsolvable. There was nothing in the cultivation world that was unsolvable. The people of Zhou Xian could choose different chess games to deal with the enemy before they arrived, but the condition was that once they chose, they would not have the chance to change it. For example, the people of Zhou Xian could choose one game to decide victory or defeat, regardless of whether it was a small chess game, a medium-sized chess game, or a super large-scale chess game that involved everyone. However, for the people of Zhou Xian, who focused on dragging things out, they would not choose such a method. Deciding victory or defeat in one game was meaningless to the people of Zhou Xian, because if the attacking side lost, they could start all over again after a period of time. Under the absolute suppression of numbers and numbers, there would be a game where they would collapse sooner or later, so they could not choose that. They could also choose to rely on the countless small chess games of the various sections. However, no matter how many sects there were in Zhou Xian, they could not be more than the Heaven's Choice continent, and it was not conducive to the gathering of elite forces. Therefore, in this domain attack and defense battle, the people of Zhou Xian had chosen the most resilient way of defending their continents. In the Zhou Xian upper realm, there were 3,000 continents of various sizes. Each continent was a game, and the success or failure of an attack or defense was determined by the number of victories. This was a grand strategy, and there were countless small details involved. Simply put, the entire attack and defense was split into 9 stages. With the 9 upper sects of Zhou Xian as the foundation, each sect would defend 1 round. If Heaven's Chosen could defeat all 9 rounds, the heaven and earth chessboard would release its restrictions to break through the defense. If he couldn't open it, he wouldn't accept any challenges for 1,000 years. Before each big game, there were 330 small games, which corresponded to the 330 little lands that the 9 upper sects of Zhou Xian commanded. The first game of Zhou Xian's defense was Wang Yan's creation, and the order of attack was like this. At the same time, Wang Yan's creation would start with 330 small games. If Heaven's Chosen could obtain a 60% chance of victory in these 330 small games, then they would automatically obtain the qualifications to start a big game with Wang Yan's creation. If Wang Yan's creation lost, Heaven's Chosen would obtain the first big game victory, and they could continue to challenge the next one. The Huangting Taoism's chess game would still start from the 330 small games under the Huangting Taoism and continue to move forward bit by bit. In order to show fairness, all the cultivators of Zhou Xian who participated in the attack and defense battle of Wanyan's creation would not be able to participate in the subsequent chess battles after they lost. Similarly, if Heaven's chosen cultivators lost a game in the big game, then all the cultivators who participated and survived could become scouts, because they would no longer be allowed to enter the Heaven and Earth chessboard again. Only the victors could continue. This was the principle. This was a very time-consuming chess game, like an old cow pulling a broken chariot. Many small games would last for several years, or even longer, until one side had a 60% chance of winning. And the big game of Wanyan's creation lasted for 10 years. Although Heaven's chosen won in the end, they were also exhausted. In 70 years, Heaven's chosen had passed a total of 4 obstacles: Wanyan's creation, Huangting Taoism, human sect, and 10,000 Buddhas worshipping the heavens. In these 4 games, not only did Zhou Xian lose, Heaven's chosen lost even more. Just from the start of the 330 games, there were countless cultivators who lost and were disqualified. Not only did this include the small sects of Zhou Xian's 3,000 small continents, but it also included the small sects affiliated to Heaven's choice. In the big game, Huangting Taoism won 1 game, human sect won 1 game, and 10,000 Buddhas worshipping the heavens won 3 games in a row. Just these 5 games made a large number of cultivators of Heaven's choice unable to continue fighting. It was only until the 3rd game of 10,000 Buddhas that Heaven's choice managed to win with great difficulty, but their losses were also huge. If one were to calculate carefully, Zhou Xian didn't suffer too big of a loss. Instead, to a certain extent, they had a certain advantage. It was just that Heaven's choice was bigger in size, so Heaven's choice could still afford this loss. The most important thing was that they could continue to continuously transfer manpower from Heaven's choice, which was the most important thing. The 5th game was Carefree Travel. Carefree Travel's 330 small games were very good. They won 3 times in a row, making a large number of Heaven's choice cultivators disqualified. Only then did it reach the big game of Carefree Travel's main sect. But in the big game, they were somewhat stretched, because they played some tricks. In the previous small games, they sent out a large number of Yuanian cultivators and God-perfected monarchs to support the small and medium-sized sects under Carefree Travel. This indeed played a big role, making the tens of thousands of Heaven's choice cultivators who participated in the 3 small games to withdraw. But in the 4th game, the Yuanian and perfected monarchs they sent out were also disqualified because of defeat. In other words, in the main game of Carefree Travel, they didn't have enough manpower. Carefree Travel was mobilizing the sect's strength. Of course, there were also some helpers from Qingwei Immortal Sect and Primeval Cave. Everyone was now on the same boat, and they were also fighting a realm war, not just for one sect or another. The core principle was that if the probability of failure increased greatly due to insufficient manpower, then it was better not to fight, so as to avoid wasting a large number of experts and disqualifying them. Among the remaining sects, the most powerful Buddhist sect, Bitter Zen Temple, was unable to participate in the Taoist game because of the disharmony of their orthodoxy. Taishan Middle Yellow was the same as Carefree Travel. Their strength was mediocre, and it was difficult for them to maintain their own game, not to mention other sections. The only ones who could lend a helping hand were the 2 most powerful sects, Qingwei Immortal Sect and Primeval Cave. While they met the requirements for the number of people in their own game, they still had some surplus, so they sent all of them to Carefree Travel. They only had one goal, and that was to at least win the big game. In this way, at least 1 or 2 Heaven's Choice cultivators would withdraw from the realm war, and the pressure on them would be reduced by a lot. Therefore, this time's Carefree Travel game was actually participated by 3 sects, with Carefree Travel as the main force. It was a test of the coordination ability of the chess players. Junior Sister Kawa. You've performed outstandingly in the previous few small games, so the sect has decided that you'll be in charge of the big game this time. How about it? Are you confident? Many people were worried that Bai Mei would hand over the most important task to a new master who did not have enough qualifications and experience, but he stood his ground against the objections of the masses. He strongly recommended her. Because this junior sister was courageous, and in addition to being cautious, she did not lack boldness and shrewdness. Carefree Travel needed a player who dared to take risks. Otherwise, this time's Carefree Travel game would not bode well for them. Chapter 14-16. Kawa will do my best. I won't disappoint the sect. Kawa didn't hesitate at all. She had been sharpening herself for 70 years. Previously, she went to Wanyan, Huangting, Human Sect, and even Thousand Buddha's Imperial Palace to observe how the other sect masters arranged the chessboard, how they changed between attack and defense, how they set up traps, how they learned from each other's strengths to make up for their weaknesses, how they struggled before death, and how they robbed Peter to pay Paul. Not only did she look at the deployment skills of her own people, but she also looked at the preferences of the Heaven's chosen people. When it was her turn, she had an outstanding record of winning 330 games in a row. In fact, because the Carefree Travel sect's overall strength was considered weak among the 9 great sects, the people they sent to help in the small games were limited in both quantity and quality. It was because of her outstanding deployment that she won 3 games in a row. In the end, it was because the Heaven's chosen people sent a large number of strong people into the game. Even the cleverest housewife couldn't cook without rice, so she lost. However, it was also because of her outstanding performance that she won the favor of White Brows and was given such an important position. She cherished this opportunity very much. She wanted to do her part for her sect and her domain. Moreover, there were people closest to her in this game. Her mother would also participate in this game of chess. If it was a powerful force like Qingwei, they would never let their pill cultivators step into the dangerous battlefield. The losses outweighed the gains. However, Xianyuan didn't succeed. They didn't have enough cultivators, and some of them were disqualified in the previous small games. Therefore, every strength was precious. No matter how average their fighting strength was, they were still stronger than Yuanying. Dejia also never avoided this kind of battle. The Carefree Travel sect was used to being carefree, but they weren't timid. They also had their own perseverance. If someone made them feel that they weren't carefree, they would also fight with their lives. Her mother became a monarch later than her. She was very worried. This might be the only selfish reason she had as the head of the battle deployment. There was still some time before the big game started. She was now drinking and gathering almost every day. She didn't want to get drunk before the battle. Instead, she wanted to observe the characteristics of every cultivator under her command. This was what she had been persisting in doing. Only in this way could she send the most suitable people at the most suitable time. Only then could they win, and not simply treat them as pawns. There was a limit of 2,000 people in one round. There were close to 5,000 Yuanying cultivators, but not all of them were good at fighting. As a result of being too carefree, almost half of them were actually playing the Taoist's best game, light wind and clouds, wild cranes, alchemy and talismans, carefree and unrestrained. Under such circumstances, in addition to the loss of a considerable part of the previous small battle, Xiaoyaoyu, together with Yuanying and the Supreme Immortal, had less than 2,000 soldiers who could fight. The rest were made up by the Qingwei Immortal Sect and the Primeval Cave. Of course, she knew her own martial brothers and sisters in her own sect. She didn't need to observe them in this way. However, she needed to know her fellow Taoists from the other 2 sections. The Yuanying were not particularly important, but she needed to know each of the Supreme Immortals. This was because in the battle, she would use them in the most suitable direction. They were capable, of noble birth, and were sent to help, so they were not easy to serve. Even in such an important world war, there were some who thought highly of themselves and admired themselves. This was human nature. When the forest was big, there were all kinds of birds. Even the Supreme Immortals were not completely exempt. For example, the gathering this time was neither fish nor fowl. The gathering was neither a gathering nor a drinking party. It was held to welcome the last batch of Master perfected lords from the two most powerful sects of Taoism. There were a total of 34 people, and most of them were very young. They had been perfected lords for less than 500 years. In a big game, there were restrictions on the cultivators who could participate. There could be no more than 9 young masters, no more than 40 primordial spirits, and no more than 200 masters. However, there could not be too many. Xiao Yu was in an awkward position. There were only 5 young masters. This time, Qingwei and Yuanshi each supported one. In fact, they were not full yet, so there was nothing they could do. With the support of the Primordial Spirit Supreme and the other 2 sects, they were full. However, in the quota of 200 masters, the gap was relatively large. Even with these helpers, there were less than 200 people. Fortunately, the gap was not too big, so they could still fight. For Qingwei and Yuanshi, of course, it was unlikely that they would send the real elites, because they still had to fight in the future. Therefore, most of the people they sent were young supreme immortals who had been monarchs for hundreds of years. They were high-spirited and a little arrogant. After all, not everyone had walked through mountains of corpses and seas of blood. It was impossible for ordinary cultivators to have an experience like Lu Xiaoyi. For most cultivators, being able to kill a cultivator of the same realm in 100 years was enough for them to boast for a long time. In such a group of people, some of them didn't take their master seriously. Their words and actions were somewhat frivolous, as if they were the saviors of the world. I'm here to help you, so you'll have to support me. Taoist Huai Yu of the Qingwei immortal sect rubbed the wine cup in his hand, a little absent-minded. He was a little dissatisfied that he was sent to Xiao Yu. It was not because he was afraid of death, but because he could not see any hope in Xiao Yu. In a game of chess, the number of young spirit cultivators was very important. To a large extent, it could determine the direction of a game of chess. There were only 7 of them on their side, and 2 of them were reinforcements. This tilted the balance of victory and defeat. Moreover, the number of masters was not full, and the Yuanian cultivators were all over the place. It was a little self-deceiving to say that there was still a chance of winning in such a comparison of strength. His point of view was that since the sect had extra strength, it would be better to distribute the precious strength among the 300 or so Xiaoyu, just like Xiaoyu, and strive to win a few more games. Only in this way could they achieve the goal of using the strength to the greatest extent, instead of struggling in a big game of chess with little chance of winning. Or, they might as well send out all the elites of Qingwei and Yuanshi to help Xiaoyu in a game and send the great cultivators of heaven's choice home. A game of chess was a battle. The most taboo thing was to gather people together. Either give up or try to win with all your strength. What could help with this kind of insignificant help? His idea was very popular among the cultivators of the 2 sects who came to help. They were not very satisfied with this kind of patching that did not change the foundation. In the final analysis, they were just worried about the face of Xiao Yu's sect. What kind of time was it that they still cared about these superficial feelings? This was what a lot of people in this group were not very satisfied with. They blamed the sect for not being decisive, blamed Xiao Yu for not being strong enough, and lamented that they might lose the qualification to fight after one battle. Because of all these, their attitude towards their masters was very impolite. In fact, their ideas were very reasonable. It was just that their reason had lost to the sect's face, which made them feel unreconciled. Chapter 14-17. I heard that in the distant 5th ring, the Buddhist forces retreated in defeat, and the one who played the main role was a true lord of carefree travel? I don't understand. Since there's such a person in carefree travel, why didn't he help his own sect? Why did he go to the distant 5th ring to show off? Why you use this as a pretext to make a fuss? Many cultivators agreed. It was difficult to spread news of what happened in the universe, but some high-profile events, such as the battle between Taoists and Buddhists, would attract many people's attention. It wasn't new for news to spread to Zhou in the past 20 years. Among them, the spiritual treasure system played a very important role. Lu Xiaowei wasn't the only person who had connections with innate spiritual treasures, and he wasn't the only person who dared to break into the domain. It was just that because there were many people who spread the news, word of mouth became a little distorted and not so accurate. Kawa didn't say anything. She couldn't show her embarrassment. As the host, she needed to maintain the stability of the people before the war. In her opinion, although these people were often dissatisfied, it was just a way to vent. Being able to come here and do their best meant something. Thus, she explained, "Senior brothers, you're right, but it's not very detailed. There are some inside stories that aren't known to many people. This person's name is Ear, and I think everyone has heard of him. He performed well when he was sent to Heaven's Choice. This person isn't from Carefree Travel, nor is he from Zhou Xian. He's a traveling Taoist who came from the distant Fifth Ring. So when Zhou Xian was in trouble at the same time, he returned to the Fifth Ring because he couldn't bear to part with his hometown and family. It's understandable. There's nothing much to say about this. The reinforcements that Ear brought were basically from the resistance forces of Heaven's Choice, and he didn't transfer any troops from Zhou Xian. So there's no need to talk about favoritism or weakening Zhou Xian. The matters of Zhou Xian should be resolved by the people of Zhou Xian. We can't rely on the help of outsiders. Don't you think so, senior brothers?" Kawa also learned of this news not long ago. It was just as she had a premonition when she first met this guy. This guy was a spy. A great battle was about to break out, so he returned to help his hometown. This was completely understandable, a matter of common sense. However, in terms of personal feelings, there was still some disappointment in his heart. It was a faint and indescribable sense of loss. Sure enough, the people of his hometown, the scenery of his hometown, the sect of his hometown, and the senior sister of his hometown were more important. Comparison was the scariest thing in everything. With this comparison, the difference would be obvious. However, she had no choice but to speak up for him. Carefree Travel is also one of the 9 upper sects of Zhou Xian. Since this person is a guest, and we've been together for hundreds of years, it's 2. If this person can be used by Zhou Xian, with the support of these 2,000 elites and the hundreds of ancient ferocious beasts, the situation will be different. At the very least, we'll be able to win 1 or 2 more rounds. The difference between the two is huge. Some cultivators were unwilling to give up. In fact, they were just venting their emotions. It was a bit unreasonable. Jia Hua was calm and didn't want to argue anymore. However, the other Taoist Xiaorao beside her, who was also helping her control the nascent soul, couldn't bear to listen anymore. This person was more serious, so he opened his mouth to refute. "Martial uncles, please know that it's precisely because these reinforcements are from Heaven's Choice that they can't come to Zhou Xian to help. They've completely lost their way to return to Heaven's Choice. We cultivators should strive to improve ourselves. It's not the right way to place our hopes on others." Another lord of the origin sneered, "Improve ourselves? If we really want to improve ourselves, why are we here?" These words were a bit too much. If they didn't respond well, it might cause a gap between these helpers and the people of Carefree Travel. This was a big taboo in battle. If the helpers were dissatisfied and the helpers were dissatisfied, how could they cooperate? Even Kawa, who was used to being calm and composed, didn't know how to answer. She couldn't ruin the atmosphere at the scene, but she couldn't weaken the momentum of her sect. Why you coughed softly. He didn't want to see such a situation. For lords of the origin like them, they had to be clear about what was right and what was wrong. They could have small dissatisfaction and small disputes, but they couldn't destroy the trust between the two sides. As a whole, if Zhou Xian had internal conflicts, there was no need to fight this defensive battle. Since he was the one who started it, of course, he had to finish it. He had to make everyone feel better. The best way to solve the problem was to change the topic. Using another attractive topic to cover up the embarrassing topic was the best way to solve it. So he laughed loudly. "I don't know why you are here, but I have my own purpose here. I've long heard that Carefree Travel Fairy Kawa is like a flying fairy, gentle and dafa. Today I see you. You are even better than the rumors. Huayu is not talented, but I'm willing to fight for you in the chessboard battle." I hope to be rewarded by you with a drink. This was the method of using personal problems to dilute the sect's problems. The frontline soldiers were not ordinary chess pieces. They had to fight to the death, and they had to go wherever there was danger. If they were not the core of the sect, the carefree travel elites who were bound by sect rules couldn't be competent. For these helpers, there must be a reason why they were willing to be the frontline soldiers. For example, a drink. If they were still alive after returning from the battle, Kawa would personally serve them wine in front of everyone. It also represented another meaning, which was to ask for a Taoist companion. Of course, cultivators couldn't speak in a straightforward manner. They had to be tactful and roundabout. Otherwise, how different would they be from ordinary people? Of course, Huayu didn't lack women. However, if it was a beautiful, immortal monarch, that would be a rare resource that could only be found by chance. He had this intention, but it wasn't necessary. He took this opportunity to bring it up. Firstly, it would resolve the awkwardness. Secondly, it would fulfill his original intention. As soon as he opened his mouth, the other cultivators who were assisting him all cheered and supported him. They were all great cultivators and knew the severity of the situation. Since they couldn't make things difficult for their master sect, it was also good to tease this fairy. Kawa Dafa said, "This is related to the safety of Zhou Xian. Senior brothers, you are all helping out for the sake of righteousness." Kawa regarded everyone as the frontline soldiers, so it's not good to favor one and discriminate against the other. However, in terms of seniority, of course, the people of the Carefree Travel School are at the front. If the master doesn't dare to fight, how can he ask the guests to fight? Kawa's response was also tactful. Over the years, she had rich experience in dealing with similar situations. There was only one principle, which was to not take advantage of this situation. She had to eliminate some unrealistic thoughts at the first moment. Otherwise, how could Yunying still be the only one who persisted until now? If her mind wasn't firm, she would have been pestered countless times by some evil person in the past hundreds of years. She would have lost her mind long ago. This was the difficulty of women's cultivation. It was much more troublesome than men's. Chapter 1418. Kawa's resolute reply made some people very dissatisfied. You, Xiaoyao, are already so troubled by your own situation, yet you are so stubborn. Everyone in your sect doesn't want to suffer losses. You are an anomaly. Huayu had been humiliated. This was originally a trivial matter, but now it had instead aroused his arrogance. If this woman knew when to advance and retreat, it would just be a drink, and it would just be a beautiful story afterwards. What could he really do? The other party is also a monarch, and she is not a girl from a small sect. But he won't get angry because it will lose his identity as a cultivator of a big sect. He just said lightly, "Oh? Then we will have to see the style of Xiaoyao vanguard soldiers. Maybe you don't need us?" Kawa was silent, and she was a little tired. In the world of cultivators, if you don't have absolute strength to suppress, a situation like this is unavoidable. It happened before, but it was not as obvious as this time, and the opponent's background was not so strong. War involves many factors, and it will never be completely tied together. Zhou Xian's performance is already very good under the pressure of external enemies. Looking at the cultivators of Heaven's choice outside, they are even worse than them. There are all kinds of scheming and fighting, and all kinds of working but not putting in effort. It is only because of their huge size that they did not cause too much trouble. But the people of Zhou Xian can already feel the deep gap between them, especially the irreconcilable contradiction between Heaven's choice and Buddhism. The key is whether they can persist until the day such a contradiction erupts. A message talisman came from the Great Freedom Hall. Kawa apologized to everyone and summoned White Eyebrows. She has something to discuss, so she can only leave a few assistants to entertain everyone. As soon as she left, the group of monarchs below became even more critical. How can it be so coincidental that she will find an excuse to leave when she is mentioned? The few free and unfettered nascent soul cultivators who stayed behind were in a bit of a predicament. They were not perfected sovereigns, so they felt a bit of pressure in front of these unruly seniors. However, they could not leave and could only put on a fawning smile and endure. The true monarchs became more and more unbridled, laughing and joking without restraint. There was even a true monarch who got together with the serious Yuanying that had spoken before. Martial nephew, let me ask you, is there any cultivator in your carefree mountain sect who is close to Fairy Jia? Let us see what kind of people they are. How could they let such a peerless beauty waste her youth and cultivate alone? Don't you know that we cultivators value the balance of yin and yang the most? Yuanying blushed. These guys were becoming more and more impudent, but he could only endure it. Firstly, his cultivation level was not high enough, and secondly, he was not the main character. Seniors, perfected cultivator Xiao Jia has always been like this. She has never been involved in those trivial matters. She only cares about the Tao and has no other thoughts. Everyone in Carefree Mountain knows this. Some true monarchs didn't believe it. Your Fairy Jia is like this, we believe her. But you've been free and unfettered for countless handsome men. I don't believe that you haven't had any thoughts about them. Tell us, and let us see what kind of outstanding person can catch the eye of your Fairy Jia. Yuanying was forced into a corner. His heart was filled with resentment, and he didn't care about anything else. Of course, he had heard some rumors. Since these so-called seniors didn't know what was good for them, he would use it to shut their mouths. Let's see who else dares to boast here. There is one person who has been pestering perfected cultivator Xiao Jia for hundreds of years. No matter how perfected cultivator Xiao Jia refused, he was shameless and pestered her endlessly. Why you laughed? Oh, your Carefree Mountain sect has always been about elegance and elegance. There's such a bad guy here? Even if Fairy Jia doesn't care, the other people in Carefree Mountain sect didn't care? Yuanying was actually secretly up to no good. He wanted to slap these seniors in the face. They didn't care. That person has always been dissolute. I heard that he even had an affair with Fairy Xia of the Huangting Taoism. He's a person who eats in his mouth and looks at the pot. It's a pity that this person's temper is explosive. Moreover, he's sinister and ruthless. Although Carefree Mountain is big, no one dares to care about him. Everyone listened with interest. Fairy Xia of the Huangting Taoism was a famous figure in the entire Zhou Xian upper realm. Many people grew up listening to this woman's name. It had been like this since Jin Dan. There were also countless wild and fanciful fantasies. Unfortunately, most of them didn't have the chance to meet her. There was such a person in Carefree Mountain sect? That's impossible, right? Moreover, they didn't hear that Fairy Xia had any Taoist companions or close friends. Someone didn't believe it. Little guy, it's not a good habit to boast in front of your seniors. If you can't tell us the truth today, we won't let you off. Another person mocked. Don't think that you can fool us with a random person. We're all at your Xiaoyao mountain right now, so we'll be able to see him immediately. To be able to do this and still be safe and sound, we really want to see what kind of amazing person he is. Yuanying was mischievous, and even led people into a trap. That's not all. I heard that once. He even sneaked into perfected Lord Xiao Jia's cave to peek at her bathing. In the end, it was left unsettled and no one dared to mention it again. A perfected lord was furious. Who is this person? He's really a disgrace to us cultivators. How is he different from those wastrels in the marketplace? If your Carefree Mountain sect can't deal with such a person, we'll help you deal with him. I don't believe that in Zhou Xian, he can do whatever he wants. Yuanying began to reveal his true intentions. It was finally time for him to vent his anger. It's not easy to deal with him. That person has a lot of brothers under him. They're all fierce and fiendish. They kill people without blinking and eat people without spitting out their bones. Seeing that the perfected lords were staring at him with murderous gazes, he was afraid that he would be in trouble if he kept them in suspense. Thus, he said softly, he has a group of friends. There are Physique Vein cultivators, Martial Sage Dao Field, Blood River Sect, and Soul cultivators. There are thousands of them. There are also ancient beasts from the entire Heaven's Choice as accomplices. He also has a sword soldier army. The most terrible thing is that the orthodoxy behind him is the most fierce Xianyuan sword sect in the universe. He doesn't seem to be here. I heard that he led his army back to the Fifth Ring. He buried 8,000 monks in the Blue Sky sect. Then, he destroyed the allied army of Zerg and the winged men in the Fifth Ring. Finally, he gathered the forces of the Fifth Ring and destroyed the Zerg winged men, forcing the Buddhist army to retreat without success. It's him. He kept pestering perfected Lord Xiao Jia. Coaxing and pestering. All kinds of molestation. No one in the entire Carefree Mountain sect dared to stand up and say a word of justice. However, perfected Lord Xiao Jia did not agree to his rude request at all. Then I'd like to ask seniors, do you feel that you're more fierce than that person? Or do you feel that you're stronger? Perfected Lord Xiao Jia didn't even put this kind of person in her eyes, let alone, of course, if there's a chance in the future, if you're willing to teach him a lesson, I, Carefree Mountain Sect, have no objections. I'll even arrange for a healing pill master to accompany you. Oh, right, he's called Single Ear. And that's his name in Zhou Xian. His real name should be Lu Xiaoyi. As for his background, if seniors feel that he's not careful, you can also talk to his sect. Yuanying was delighted, because the seniors were all dumbfounded. Chapter 1419. Little Yuanying was very satisfied. This person is vengeful and short-tempered. If anyone offends him or the people around him, he will definitely take revenge. Haha, of course, Immortal Xiao Jia is not a short-tempered person. As long as everyone works together, he will treat everyone as friends. The universe was boundless and the distance was infinite. News did not flow freely. After many mouths, Lu Xiaoyi was demonized without exception. Some of them were intentional, while others were just trying to boost morale. In any case, Lu Xiaoyi had now been described as a monster with 3 heads and 6 arms. His ordinary side had been deliberately ignored, leaving only the exaggerated fierceness. He was still very good at fooling people. At the very least, no one talked about Immortal Xiao Jia anymore. This was because people like her were usually very jealous. It was not worth it to offend the big snake under the bush for flour that could only be seen but not eaten. Moreover, this was originally a trivial matter that was casually brought up. No one had deliberately come here to propose marriage. Everyone had a goal, and a pursuit. For the future of Zhou Xian. The little nascent soul suddenly realized that his goal was not very successful because these elders had quickly connected him to the big demon. The Qingwei Immortal Sect had done it through the slug, and the Primeval Cave Sect had done it through the hairlip. The enemy of an enemy may be a friend, but the friend of a friend must also be a friend. Was there a problem? Everyone was actually a family. The role change was so natural that little Yuanying could not help but admire the ability of these elders to swallow their saliva. This was really a great cultivation. This quick-wittedness and naturalness made people want to prostrate themselves in admiration. But no matter what, the matter that Immortal Xiao Jia did not solve was solved by little Yuanying. This kind of solution was somewhat brainless. Immortal Xiao Jia would not be angry, right? Kawa did not have time to be angry. Although she knew what happened at the gathering immediately, although she was a little angry at her subordinate, Yuanying, for speaking rudely and putting himself in a very awkward position. After thinking about it, since it was inevitable to come into contact with these inexplicable things in the cultivation world, it was better to just get involved with a fierce person. At least, no one would come to find trouble with him. Lu Xiaoyi? This guy seemed to have mentioned it to her before. It was half a joke and she did not take it seriously. But now that she knew, she could not help but feel sad. Knowing that it was an eternal farewell. Life was painful. She didn't have the time to be sentimental, because the Carefree Travel Competitions roster had been completely confirmed. There were still a few days from now, and she had to use this short period of time to understand each and every one of them. In order to help her, Bai Mei had also deliberately explained the actual situation of each and every one of the true monarchs in the Carefree Travel Competition. These things were actually very important to a sect, and they were the biggest secrets of the sect's safety. Kawa and her mother were both cultivating in the Carefree Mountain. The elders of the family had never left the Carefree Mountain.
They were trustworthy.
This was the vision of a responsible major cultivator. You don't have to worry about the battle between the sun spirits. Although Xiaoyao Yu only has 7 young gods participating in the battle, it's not a problem for me to fight against 3 of them alone. If there are unforeseen consequences because of the sun spirits, I will bear the responsibility. You just need to coordinate the cultivators below, especially the use of the Supreme. Why, I heard that some of the foreign Supreme are not very convinced. Do you need my help? Kawa shook her head. No need. Kawa can solve it. In fact, it seems to have been solved. White Brow sighed, which was rare. For someone who had always been tough, there was rarely a time when he regretted. I painstakingly raised a hungry tiger. It wasn't easy for its teeth to be sharp enough to be released to bite people. In the end, I accidentally let the tiger return to the mountain. The affairs of the world are truly unpredictable and unpredictable. Kawa was very curious. Senior brother, I heard that the 5th ring road is extremely long. It can't be reached in hundreds of years. There is also the pain of getting lost. In that case, how did he go back? If there really is some kind of shortcut, since he can go back, he can naturally come back. White Brow snorted. No matter how I thought about it, he didn't have a feasible way to leave, so I was a little lax on him. Who would have thought that he actually had the ability to use an innate spirit treasure? He used the Heavenly Eyes spirit treasure to achieve his goal. This brat, he's a good actor. With such an escape route, he still pretended to go around and listen for the secrets of the punctuation marks.
I was also fooled by him.
This should be just a coincidence. It should be when he went to the Taipu realm in Jindan. This brat has been holding back all this time. How scheming. Kawa, you don't know, but Taipu Jun won't come back this time. This is a normal defense of the Heavenly Eyes spirit treasure system. Another innate spirit treasure is about to come. Even if this brat is making a scene and pretending to be obedient, it's impossible for him to use another spirit treasure so quickly, right? He can't come back. Even if he knows the location, he won't be able to fly back without 300 years. What can you do? Kawa was a little disappointed, but she didn't show it. Reason told her that even if there was an extra sun spirit, it might not be able to change the outcome of this chess game. This was not something that individual energy could change at all. But she was still very curious. She wanted to know if this guy had been lying to her all this time. Senior brother. He said that ever since the first day he came to Zhou Xian, you already knew of his origins and have always tolerated him. That's why he said he wasn't a spy. If you must say it, are you also an accomplice? White Brow laughed. Of course. I'm a dignified sun spirit. How could I not know that 2 Jin Dan ants sneaked in under my nose? But I'm not their accomplice. I'm just a caretaker. It's just a pity that the caretaker failed. They took my bait, borrowed my power, and basked in my glory, but in the end, played a victorious escape. Kawa finally breathed a sigh of relief in her heart. It seemed that this guy hadn't done anything bad in Zhou Xian this time. The only thing about personal morality was that she had to bear it herself. Anyway, her reputation wasn't good now.
It had long been ruined by that guy.
White Brow said seriously, in this big game, there are many forces on the sidelines who want to see us make a fool of ourselves. Only self-improvement is the best way to shut people's mouths. We've performed well in the previous 3 small games. As long as we can win a big game, we won't lose out overall. So my request is that you don't hold back. Don't hold back your strength for the sake of safety.
We won't have a next time.
This is your only chance. For the other cultivators of Xiaoyao, the sect has already given strict orders. There is no retreat. The cowards will be kicked out of the sect. You don't have to worry. At critical moments, you should try your best to use your own people in key positions. At least we'll fight hard enough. Here's the list. Take it back and plan carefully. Chapter 1420. On the list, there were 7 yang spirits, 40 primordial spirits, and 187 yin spirits. In addition to the many Yuanying, there were actually less than 2,000 people, and there was still a gap. However, it didn't matter. In a big game of chess with thousands of people, these dozens of people didn't make much of a difference. There was really no way to send them. Those who couldn't fight came to make up the numbers, and it would be easy to strengthen the other party's confidence. This was the first time Kawa was in charge of such a large-scale scene. It didn't mean that no one in the Carefree Travel could host it except her, but everyone else had the obligation to go in and fight, so the burden fell on her. She had observed this process 4 times, but watching others dispatch and doing it herself were 2 different things. The responsibility was heavy, and she was a little nervous. The big game was different from the other games of the Heaven and Earth chessboard. Relatively speaking, the rules and restrictions of the Heaven and Earth chessboard were reduced to the lowest, but the self-initiative of the cultivators was maximized. It was a half-closed, half-restrained, and half-autonomous game. The game was divided into 4 realms, which were not connected to each other. They were called the God, Immortal, Devil, and Human realms. The God realm was a place for Yang spirits to compete, the Immortal realm was a place for primordial spirits to fight, the Devil realm was a place for Yin spirits to fight, and the Human realm was a battlefield for Yuanying to fight. In each realm, people were allowed to withdraw. This was a very humane part of the Heaven and Earth chessboard, which left enough room for the participating cultivators. It was a competition of the will of the 2 sides to fight. It was not enough to just have ability and strength, but also the determination to fight to the end. In this regard, because the people of Zhou Xian were protectors, they were more tenacious. If one side won in a certain realm, then they would naturally be qualified to go up to the next realm. For example, in the human realm of Yuanying, if the Yuanying of Zhou Xian won the final victory, then they could enter the Devil realm to help their own Yin spirits. If they won again, everyone would go to the Immortal realm together to fight against the primordial spirits of Heaven's choice, and they would all reach the God realm together. This way, they could maximize the ability of cultivators with cultivation lower than the Yang spirit realm, so that the cultivators of all realms would not be mixed together, and the battle would be full of uncertainty. For the people of Zhou Xian, their number of Yang spirit cultivators was not as good as that of the Tianzi continent, so they used this method to weaken the influence of the Tianzi continent as much as possible. Every realm had its own rules. For example, Army chess had the most people in the mortal realm. Chess had the most people in the Yin soul realm. Chess had the most people in the Yin soul realm. Checkers had the least people in the primordial soul realm. There were no rules in the immortal realm. He might as well just kill him and lie down. Kawa didn't need to worry about the deity realm. With her current cultivation level, she wouldn't be able to handle it. As there were fewer immortal realm immortal soul cultivators, the immortal soul perfected lords in the chessboard could more or less react according to their own circumstances. They only needed Kawa to give them suggestions from an overall perspective. Because there were too many nascent soul cultivators, each side had close to 2,000 people. Truth be told, it was a chaotic battle. Thus, they could only control the overall situation on a large scale. It was very difficult for them to control the situation to a single person. Most of the time, the assistant was in charge. Only in the Devil realm was the battlefield of the Yin soul perfected lords. There were many people, so they couldn't effectively form an autonomous command, but there weren't so many that it was chaotic. Therefore, this was Kawa's main battlefield. And most importantly, no matter how many Yuanying cultivators there were, it was difficult for them to pose a threat to the Yang spirit. For example, in the big and small intestine blind path, several great Buddhas fell under the spells of many perfected lords because they couldn't move. In fact, it had nothing to do with the Yuanying. The 3 levels of perfected lords could already threaten each other. Thousands of Yuanying cultivators and hundreds of Yin souls were fundamentally different. Therefore, based on her previous observation experience, Kawa decisively focused all her attention on the Devil realm where the Yin souls were. This group was the biggest variable in the chessboard. Many of the Yin soul perfected lords had the strength close to the primordial soul stage. They were a group full of imagination. But it just so happened that they were in the Devil realm where the Yin souls were. 13 of them were missing. This required Kawa to use her ability to command and use the sharpest spear to attack the opponent's weakest shield. Accumulating small victories was a great victory. Securing victory in the Devil Realm could be said to be half the battle won. 187 in soul perfected lords, among which 33 were from Qingwei and Yuanshi. Their strength might be very strong, but she wasn't sure to what extent they would obey her and whether they would be willing to die for her in this battle. It was very difficult, but this wasn't a reason for her to give up. Therefore, she decided to gather these supporters again and try to win their trust. But the effect of this gathering was obviously a little off. Before she could open her mouth, countless questions were thrown at her from the opposite side. Fairy Jia, may I ask how it feels to be entangled for 600 years? Fairy, are you deliberately baiting us? Playing hard to get? Grapes that you can't eat are the sweetest? Fairy Jia, may I ask what you think of Fairy Xia of the Huangting Taoism? We are all reputable people, and we won't easily spread it to others. Fairy Jia, may I ask what happened on the last night in the cave residence? It's reasonable to say that with the level of a supreme, it's impossible for someone to touch the window without reacting. Is this a trap? Give a sweet date first? In the end, Kawa still couldn't figure out the mentality of these people. Was it to respect the strong and admit defeat? Or was it to be the opposite? When the time came, they would work but not do their best to laugh at the carefree travel team. Qian Xiao was also a very strange creature. Time passed in the blink of an eye, especially when you wanted to think more about something. Today was the day of the Carefree Travel Team's grand chess game. Not only the cultivators of the Carefree Travel Team, but also the disciples of the small sects under the Carefree Travel Team. They were the most relaxed group because they had already completed their mission with outstanding results. In a sense, they didn't let Zhou Xian down. There were also people from other sects, whether it was the Eliminated Innumerable Creation sect, the Huangting Taoism sect, the Human sect, or the Taishan Middle Yellow sect, the Qingwei Immortal sect, and the Yuanshi True Cave. Everyone gathered here as if they could connect with the participating cultivators, giving them strength and making them feel that they were with the whole of Zhou Xian. This was also a psychological tactic implemented by the higher-ups of Zhou Xian, which could effectively increase the confidence and courage of the participating cultivators. In a battle between cultivators, it was very important whether they dared to fight to the death. Except for people like Lu Xiaoyi, who rolled in life and death situations every day, most cultivators still lacked such experience. If you were timid, you might lose the opportunity that originally belonged to you. Because of the fear of losing thousands of years of cultivation, you wouldn't be able to exert your strength beyond your level. In most cases, the difference between cultivators was the same, and the difference was in mentality. It depended on whether you were willing to go all out. Chapter 14:21. P.S. Tonight's update will be moved to 8 o'clock. Sloth. Work harder and try to write one more chapter. At the same time, ask for votes. The battle of monthly votes is too fierce. I thought that it would be no problem to fight for the top 10, but now it seems that I was dreaming. Friends with tickets. Don't forget. On the last day, let's see the power of the sword soldiers. Thank you for your support. The cultivators participating in the battle were bathed in auspicious clouds. The cloud was a chess cloud. When the time came, it would naturally accept all the cultivators into the chess game. There was the aura of a sect, and it couldn't be faked. In a battle like this, the heaven and earth chessboard had its own rules. For the defending side of Zhou Xian, the cultivators' qualifications would be strictly controlled. This was also Lu Xiaoyi's original consideration. Even if he brought his own army back, it would be difficult for him to participate in such a game of chess. Because he hadn't lived in Zhou Xian before, he was not qualified. As for how long he had to live in Zhou Xian before he could be considered a real person of Zhou Xian, this boundary was naturally considered by the heaven and earth chessboard. It was unknown to the cultivators. This was the power of a real innate spiritual treasure. It would never deliberately side with one side in the chess game and enhance the owner's abilities. This was not the way of spiritual treasures, but the cornerstone of the spiritual treasure race's survival for millions of years. It was also because of this that no human would think of how to destroy them. Because as long as you occupied Zhou Xian with your own ability, the heaven and earth chessboard would still be at your disposal. When a large number of attackers came, blocking the invaders and delaying them into the chess game was the greatest help in itself. Otherwise, with the size of the cultivators of heaven's choice, Zhou Xian would have fallen long ago. The rules were the cornerstone of the existence of innate spiritual treasures. When both sides entered the chessboard space, it was the fairest battle. It was so fair that the rules couldn't be used. This was already the greatest help for the people of Zhou Xian. What else could they ask for? Ask the heaven and earth chessboard to devour the people of heaven's choice? How could it be possible? White Eyebrows and the other 7 young gods bowed to the sea of people below. For the sake of Zhou Xian, we cultivators should work together and live up to your expectations. The sound of landslides and tsunamis could be heard, making people's blood boil. But those young spirit masters were not the same. They stood higher and saw farther. In fact, there had always been controversy among the top young gods in Zhou Xian about Xiaoyaoyu's big game. In the heaven and earth chessboard rules that they had chosen, there had always been 2 schools of thought. One group gathered all the most elite forces in Zhou Xian to defend 2 or 3 big games and give up on the rest. There was an advantage to this method, and that was that they could win several or even dozens of matches in a row, eliminating a large number of outstanding cultivators from Heaven's choice. But the disadvantages were equally obvious. Once Heaven's chosen one reacted and gathered the elites of more than 30 countries to fight back, as long as they were defeated, it would be equivalent to Zhou Xian's most elite forces being wiped out. The process was that Zhou Xian's resistance would become weaker and weaker until all the elites were killed, and there was no way for them to make a comeback. The other group was doing what they were doing now. They used the 9 upper sects as the main force to deal with them evenly. The advantage of this method was that the resistance was balanced. The powerful upper sects were always left behind, such as Qingwei, Yuanshi, and Bitter Meditation. But there were also many disadvantages. Just like Wanyan's good fortune, the big game was easily defeated, and the elites were no longer useful. In the first 4 games, Zhou Xian had always used the second method. 9 games to determine the winner and loser. Now, more than half of the process had been completed, so the 5th game of Xiaoyaoyu was very crucial. Would it change? Or would it not change? What cultivators valued most was how to grasp the fleeting opportunity of change in the trend. Their intuition was in the 5th game of Waste Eye. But such a big change, a completely subversive arrangement of troops, required great courage to implement. For most Zhou Xian people who were used to living a peaceful life, this was really too difficult for them. Therefore, the radical faction, led by White Eyebrows, insisted on starting the 5th game with all their might. They concentrated their strength to defeat Heaven's choice. But the conservative faction still insisted on fighting the previous way. The less trouble, the better. They passively followed the changes. If the overall situation did not change, they would not change either. The 2 sides fought several times, but they could not figure out the reason. White Eyebrow's strength was tyrannical, and he was outstanding among the young gods in Zhou Xian. But the sect behind him, Xiaoyaoyu, was weak and could not speak harshly. In the end, it formed such a strange situation. It was not that the other Taoists did not send any reinforcements. However, only 2 young gods had come, and they had been attracted by Bai Mei's personal charm. There were only 30 or so Yin gods left, and most of them were young. Those with profound cultivation and experience had been left behind in the sect. The reinforcements were sent, but they were not in place. This was the actual situation of Xiaoyaoyu's battle. This was a clash of ideas between aggressiveness and stability, a divergence in the direction of sharp change and defense. The 2 sides were in a stalemate and could not reach a consensus, resulting in the current awkward situation. This was also the reason why so many Supremes were not satisfied at the gathering organized by Kawa. It was not that they were afraid to fight, but that there was a huge difference in strategy. Many people were not optimistic about White Eyebrow's party's determination to change. They thought that it was more because Xiaoyaoyu wanted to make a name for himself by borrowing the strength of the other sex. Among the remaining 4 sects, except for Taishuan's Yellow Emperor, who supported White Eyebrows, the other 3 were ambiguous. Taishuan's Yellow Emperor was also a weakling, and his right to speak was about the same as Xiaoyaoyu. This was the reason why White Eyebrow's tone was full of sorrow. He wanted to kill the enemy, but he was powerless to reverse the situation. This was the portrayal of his current mood. At this point, other than doing his best in this battle, there was no other good way. Then he looked at the Supreme's group, Yuanying group. In this chess battle, no one can be ignored. Everyone is important, because your personal success or failure will affect the success or failure of the group. Yuanying can help Yin gods if they work hard. Yin gods can support primordial spirits if they work hard. Primordial spirits together can decide the direction of the battle. Every single one of them was indispensable. I hope that in this battle, you can show the strength of the people of Zhou Xian. Anyway, White Eyebrows, will not withdraw because of injury. What about you? Everyone shouted in unison, and the sound waves shook the sky. However, in White Eyebrow's ears, it was just a kind of noise. Who knew which of them were really fighting to the death? Which of them were just fishing in troubled waters? The human heart was the most unpredictable. The upper realm of Zhou Xian also had requirements for this kind of battle. Those who were seriously injured and could not fight were allowed to withdraw from the chessboard. Just this rule alone was enough to make many cowards take advantage of it. Which cultivator didn't have a few tricks up their sleeves? Which cultivator didn't have the ability to properly withdraw without harming their foundation? Sighing, he knew that the time had come. He looked at a quiet room in the Great Freedom Hall below him. That was where the few chief officials were. Please. White Eyebrows was the first to crash into the chessboard, and the other 6 young gods followed. Then it was the group of Supremes and a large number of Yuanying. Under the eyes of tens of thousands of people, no one would show fear at this time. It was too unwise. Kawa listened to her senior brother's instructions. She felt the burden on her shoulders like a mountain, so heavy that she could not breathe. When it rains, it pours. As soon as the carefree cultivators entered the chessboard of heaven and earth, an unexpected situation happened. 187 Supremes of Yin gods entered. This was planned long ago. She even knew their names, appearances, strengths, and general temperament. However, as soon as they entered the chessboard of heaven and earth, the feedback from the chessboard was that there were 189. What the hell? Where did the extra 2 come from? Were they spies of heaven's choice? Chapter 14:22. Kawa immediately gave an order to one of her assistants. Go and investigate. Find out who the 2 Yin deities were during the chaos just now. This was definitely not an unnecessary move. In the second battle of Huangting Taoism, there was a change in the number of Yin masters participating in the battle. The actual number was different from the planned number, and there were 3 more Yin master perfected cultivators. At that time, the head of the Yellow Court did not pay much attention to it, thinking that it was a few enthusiastic perfected cultivators from some sects who stepped forward out of passion. In the end, these 3 people caused trouble everywhere in the demon realm. They did not fight when it was time to fight, and when it was time to fight, they even attacked their own companions in the end. There was no doubt that they were spies. This kind of situation was very likely to happen. Heaven's Chosen had long set up a chess piece in Zhou Xian. After hundreds of years of changes, the Heaven and Earth chessboard recognized them as people from Zhou Xian, and this kind of situation would occur. The Heaven and Earth chessboard was very powerful, but no matter how powerful it was, it could not see through people's hearts. Heaven's Chosen took advantage of the loophole, and the result was a pity that they lost. Originally, the Huangting Taoism had a good chance of winning that round. Their strategy was the opposite of that of the Carefree Travel team. They gave up the previous 330 small rounds and focused on the overall situation. In the end, they only won one round before the three spies spoiled their plan. The entire Yellow Court's record was very bad, and they were only slightly better than Wan Yan's creation team. With this kind of lesson, the sects were very careful in the later rounds, afraid that someone would impersonate them and take all kinds of precautions. However, the following rounds of the Human Sect and the Thousand Buddha Imperial Sect were all orderly, and similar incidents did not happen again. In the end, when it came to the Carefree Travel Team, because the Master Perfected cultivators were not full, they were taken advantage of again. There was still some time between entering the game and the beginning of the battle, so Kawa had enough time to determine the origin of these two people. Even if she had already determined that these two people were spies.
Spies.
She hated this kind of people the most. Just like that annoying guy. He made people suspicious and restless all day long. It was not difficult to find out the origin of these two people. Because the starting point was above Shaorao Mountain, there were no auspicious clouds anywhere else, so they could not enter. After experiencing the lesson of the Huangting Taoism, the sects had taken corresponding measures. There were many shadow stones from different directions and angles, so that they could determine who had entered the game. What's more, there were dozens of young gods from other sections. Under their surveillance, nothing could escape their eyes. But even with such a meticulous arrangement, she still received an inexplicable piece of news. All the Shadow Stone's records, the cultivators who entered Taoism Taoist plan. In addition, none of the dozens of young god ancestors present noticed any signs of abnormality. No one could enter the heaven and earth chessboard so openly in front of them. All the young god ancestral masters agreed that the two extra people were most likely from the outside world, entering the chessboard space from the side of heaven. They're still very likely to be spies. The deputy quickly reported what he had learned. His meaning was very clear. If a person chosen by heaven had entered the upper realm of Zhou Xian hundreds of years ago, obtained the recognition of the heaven and earth chessboard after a long time, and then escaped from Zhou Xian before the upper realm of Zhou Xian sealed off the domain, then these people might enter the chessboard from outer space and be used as pawns of Zhou Xian. Of course, the premise was that Zhou Xian did not have enough people. This was another way to pass off as a fake. It was safer for spies, but it was also full of uncertainty, because you did not know if you could enter this game. However, there was actually another possibility. That was, the real Zhenjuan Zhou Xian had been traveling outside and had hurried back to support his hometown. Coincidentally, he had arrived at this point. However, this possibility was not high. Not only did it require a coincidence of time, but he also had to have the strength to break into the airspace alone. How could it be so easy to break into the early warning system of more than 100,000 people?
He was a spy.
Kawa made a decision. She needed to find an opportunity to kill him. However, she could not do it at the beginning. Otherwise, it would easily cause chaos in the camp battle at the beginning. It was best to find an opportunity during the battle. Stealthily. God, immortal, devil, and mortal realms. The god realm had no rules and could fight freely. The primordial spirits of the immortal realm followed the rules of Chinese checkers. There were too many yuanying in the mortal realm, so they followed the rules of army chess. Only the Yin gods of the devil realm used the rules of Go. In the devil realm, it was also the realm where the master had the most power and influence. For the master, not only did he need to be skilled in Go, but he also needed to have a thorough understanding of the 200 chess pieces under his control. This was because although this was Go, it still had a strong requirement for the individual cultivator, which was the individual chess piece. Just like the other types of chess games on the heaven and earth chessboard, the master could provide you with a chance to eat the chess piece, but whether you could eat the chess piece or not depended on the cultivator's final strength. Otherwise, even if you surrounded the opponent, there was nothing you could do if you did not have enough strength to eat the chess piece. There were also many special rules that were not the same as the real Go in the mortal world. This was also a major characteristic of Go in the cultivation world. There were no chess pieces that would not move if they were not placed on the board. They were very particular about the autonomy of the chess pieces, and not all of them could only wait passively. The connection between Jia Hua and the cultivator chess pieces on her side couldn't be achieved through direct verbal communication, discussion of tactics, bargaining, coercion. They could only carry out the most simple and direct orders, such as whether or not a chess piece should be deployed, where the chess piece should be placed, and make clear requests. The chess pieces must be in line with her orders on the dafa, but they could adjust the details by themselves. For example, if she placed one of her chess pieces in the star position on the chessboard, then in reality, the chess piece could choose 4 other positions besides occupying the star position. In terms of Go, it could also choose 2 small positions and 2 high positions. This was part of the freedom that the Heaven and Earth chessboard granted to each cultivator chess piece. Therefore, the victory or defeat of a game of Go not only tested the ability of the master, but also the cooperation between the master and the chess pieces. If all the chess pieces were in line with the master's orders, then the master could fully exert his or her playing ability and perfectly achieve his or her strategic and tactical position. This was the main key. On this basis, occasionally some chess pieces could freely play according to the specific situation, and it would be a good game of Go. Under the strict orders of the sect, Kawa believed that the 154 free and unfettered in-spirit chess pieces would completely obey her orders. They would not disobey in public, but do their best to help the master to complete the layout of the battle. However, the 33 cultivators from the Qingwei Immortal Sect and the Primeval Cave might not be the same. Maybe they could be obedient in the layout stage, but once they entered the middle game, they would probably do something evil. As for the 2 spies, it was impossible to use them in the layout stage. Otherwise, if you asked them to divine the star position, they would occupy the high and small positions, and the layout would be a complete failure. Chapter 14:23. P.S. I'm not satisfied with the writing of the Great War of Zhou Xian. Maybe it's because I'm in a hurry. But no matter what, I'm sorry to everyone. I need to change my thinking in the future. Xiaoyi wants to walk her own path alone. Pretending to be in the universe is the right path. But on the last day, she still shamelessly asks for votes. She wants to break into the top 10 of the monthly votes list for the first time in 3 years of writing. In the future, when she faces her grandson, she can boast, "Your grandfather was also in the top 10 of the monthly votes list on Qidian." Of course, the child will say, "Everyone else is fighting for the first place. How can you fight for the 10th place?" Now that she's stuck at the 11th place, it's very awkward. In the words of Landa, she's hanging on the balcony. Please act according to your ability. If you tip 1,500 points after 8 p.m., you'll get 4 monthly votes. That's 4 times the monthly votes. You'll be able to push Sloth forward. Many friends have tipped, so there's no need to come again. But there may be many friends who don't care about this rule. Tonight, the last night, please help Sloth. Thank you, everyone. The ranking is fake, but friendship is real. No matter what, thank you for your selfless help in the past 3 years. Thank you. Kawa's principle of using the 2 spies is to try not to use them, or to use them in an unimportant position and get rid of them. Using them in the layout will affect the overall plan. For example, from relying on the position of the stars, because the chess pieces act on their own initiative, it may become a high purpose and focus on external forces. Or it may become a complicated small-eyed demon sword. This is not tolerated by the players because it will disrupt the consistency of the overall layout. It can't be used in the middle game of the game. If you want to push, you have to lean. If you want to push, you have to lean. If you want to push, you have to push. There's no way. For the time being, she can't think too much about the 2 spies. Now, these chess pieces are still waiting in the chessboard space. They can't see each other. What she's facing now is guessing the order of the chess pieces. A group of chess pieces appears on the Heaven and Earth chessboard. According to the order, it's her turn to pick the opponent. She also controls her spiritual sense to wrap the chess pieces. In the chessboard space, it's impossible to rely on spiritual sense to judge. She can only rely on luck. The opponent guessed it right. The order of the chess pieces has been decided. Heaven's Choice's black pieces go first, Zhou Xian's white pieces follow. At this point, everything was ready. The fifth round of the Heaven's Choice Zhou Xian battle officially began. The black side had a well-thought-out plan. Opening with 2 consecutive stars, they were in the lead. Kawa should make a mistake and focus on the facts. For a moment, the chess pieces were placed, as if they were flying. In the layout stage, the chess pieces were placed very quickly, and the prelude board was quickly finished. Not having much contact was also a characteristic of the cultivation chess game. After all, in the end, whether or not to eat or occupy the land depended on the cultivator's individual ability. No matter how good one's plan was, if one couldn't take advantage of it, it was all in vain. The Devil Realm opened, and the other 3 realms also began at the same time. In the Divine Realm, the 16 Yang spirits were fighting against each other. Bai Mei alone faced 3 Yang spirits chosen by heaven. He was fearless and at ease, showing the strong confidence of a superior Yang spirit. The other 6 battlefields also had Yang spirits confronting each other, each displaying their own abilities. This was a long process of fighting. First, they were all Dharma cultivators, and second, they had the abnormal rebirth ability of Yang spirits. For them, there was room for mistakes in the battle. First, it didn't matter if they made a mistake or 2, because it could be corrected through rebirth. Therefore, there was no need to take too many risks. In probing each other's strength, they tried to avoid being killed as much as possible. The best way was to control the chess game. The primordial spirit battlefield was very fast because the number of people was relatively small. There were only 80 primordial spirits on both sides. They jumped around in the chess space, each doing what they wanted. Here, it was difficult to have room for the master to play. It was more about the individual cultivator's decision and courage. The situation was complicated and ever-changing. It was better to let the cultivators control the shape of the battlefield than to let others control it. Therefore, only one of Kawa's deputies was paying attention to this place, providing the overall shape of the battlefield at any time, and then leaving it to the primordial spirits to make specific decisions. The bloodiest battlefield was the Yuanying's army chess battlefield, which was the one Lu Xiaoyi had participated in when he was in the shaking Shadow Realm. They were in groups, moving back and forth. The master could control the situation in Dafa, but once the 2 sides came into contact, it was completely out of control. They could only move forward. Any hesitation, timidity, or retreat would cause serious consequences. Here, one of Kawa's deputies was paying specific attention. When there was a choice in the direction of Dafa, she would make the decision. However, there were not many opportunities like this. Once thousands of Yuanying fought, in addition to strength, it was more a competition of willpower. In the Divine Land, the situation of the 2 sides could not be judged. This was also the place where the winner and loser of every big game would be decided at the end. Now, it was just a warm-up, and there was still a long way to go before the winner was decided. In the Divine Land, the swing between victory and defeat was too big. The casualties of a few people would often determine the short-term trend. One moment, Tianze had the upper hand, and the next moment, Zhou Xian had the advantage, but they could not last long. On the whole, the difference was not big. However, because the battlefield was only at the beginning, many things were still hidden under the iceberg and could not be reflected for a while. In the Divine Land, Zhou Xian's Yuanying had begun to show signs of weakness. This often happened in the previous games. Because Tianze's Yuanying had come into contact with the Great Way tablet earlier, they had some convenience in comprehending the Tao state. When reflected in the battle, it would directly affect the direction of the army chess. No matter how many Yuanying there were, it was difficult to change the result of the battle of the Yang spirit. However, they did not need to change the battlefield of the Divine Land. For them, as long as they could threaten to change the battlefield of the Devil Land, it was enough. Marshal Uncle Jia. The number of people on both sides of the battlefield of the Divine Land has increased to 50 people. The deputy reminded. Kawa's expression did not change. Tell them to gather together and delay the other side. I don't ask them to win, but I need time. Kawa needed enough time to complete the victory of the Devil and cultivators in each realm could only go up and not down. Therefore, for the time being, she did not need to worry about what would happen to the primordial spirit of the divine land. However, she needed to pay attention to whether the Yuanian cultivators in the divine land would rush up. That almost meant that the battle was bound to fail. The situation was not optimistic. Although Kawa's chess skills were not inferior to others, the heaven and earth chessboard was not completely a game of chess in the mortal world. There were many other factors to consider. For example, could you play the chess piece or not? Could you slay the dragon or not? Could you play the game or not? These all depended on the cultivator's strength in the end. Even in the overall situation, because of the disadvantage of the Yuaniing in the divine land, there was also a time limit for her. Just like in a game of Go, she had started the countdown, but the other side still had a lot of time to play. This was not her fault, but she had to take it into consideration. In the way of playing chess, the impact was that she had to adopt more aggressive playing methods, while the other side could remain calm and use softness to conquer strength. Kawa focused most of her energy on the middle game. The chess pieces were intertwined with each other, and a few big dragons were intertwined together. She had no choice but to do so. If she wanted to finish off her opponent quickly, she could not play steadily and steadily. Her original style of chess was not one of strength, but of agility and elegance. She was very good at dodging and moving. There were many factors that determined the direction of the game. She could only put the factors that she could not control to the back of her mind. She could not control the individual abilities of the cultivators, and she could not decide the direction of the Yuaniing battlefield. What she could do now was to use all of her wisdom and firmly control the direction of the game. Before senior brother Bai Mei left, he asked for her help. This sentence was too stressful. As a matter of fact, the most important factor that determined the outcome of the heaven and earth chessboard was always the strength of the cultivators and the overall balance of all levels. Her role in the game could only be maximized when the two parties were on par with each other. Martial uncle. The difference in the number of people between the two sides in the Divine Land battlefield is more than 100. I estimate that within 3 days, we will be defeated in the Divine Land battlefield. Martial uncle, you have to be mentally prepared. The deputy monitoring the Divine Land said bitterly. But there was more than one bad news. The other deputy monitoring the Divine Land battlefield also did not have good news. Martial uncle. In the Divine Land battlefield, Heaven's Choice has 34 primordial soul cultivators left, and Zhou Xian has 28. This situation has not changed for a while. I estimate that the trend is set. I'm afraid that we will lose in the Divine Land battlefield. Chapter 1424. Except for the Yangshan battlefield, Zhou Xian was at a disadvantage in the other 3 battlefields, and this disadvantage was getting worse and worse. Kawa knew that she couldn't delay any longer. She had to take decisive measures. She had been planning for this for a long time in order to kill the opponent's dragon. Now that the early preparations were ready, she decided to take action without hesitation. She carefully considered the order of the game and found that there was no problem. For this big dragon, she had already thought about it for several days. She had already considered the countless changes that would follow. Cultivators relied on their powerful memory and deduction abilities. A monarch chess player and a mortal chess player were 2 completely different concepts. This was due to their brain development that far exceeded that of ordinary people. 1 step, 1 board, and 1 flight. She cut off the opponent's dragon. Logically speaking, if the opponent's dragon was cut off, there would be no chance of survival. In order to slay the dragon this time, she had lost a lot of points in other aspects. If she took it step by step, she would definitely lose. If she succeeded in slaying the dragon, she would win in the middle game. This was the charm of the Devil Realm's chess game. The general situation was set. The opponent jumped into her tiger's eye with a casual move. His intention was obvious. He wanted to create a robbery material and fight to take back the dragon. From the point of view, it was impossible for the dragon to be the eye. This was also the opponent's last struggle. Kawa didn't hesitate to rob. This was a worry-free robbery. She had already understood. She wasn't afraid of the opponent's dying struggle at all. Even in the mortal world, such a method would be vulgar. It was nothing more than a buffer method to buy time, and it was a waste of one's own tribulation material. She only needed to lift it. But she didn't lift it. After a few moments of battle, Kawa's chess piece that was in charge of lifting the chess piece was eaten instead. This was the mystery of the heaven and earth chessboard. Even if you calculated everything correctly, if the opponent filled your tiger's eye with powerful cultivators, but you couldn't eat them, then all the previous arrangements would be in vain. This was also the purpose of the host of Heaven's Choice. In terms of chess skills, he might not be as good as Kawa, but he had more choices than Kawa in the choice of powerful chess pieces. Obviously, this chess piece was the most powerful cultivator under the other party's command. He was here to break the rules of the game at the crucial moment. Kawa's expression did not change. She was also prepared for such a change. He had also reserved 3 of his strongest Een Master perfected lords. 2 of them were carefree Een Masters, while the other was an outstanding helper, Huayu. It was to deal with such a tough opponent. She had seen Heaven's Choice use similar tactics in the previous games, so it wasn't new. However, while the strategy wasn't new, the people were. 3 people were thrown into the battle in a row. 1 died and 2 were seriously injured and had to withdraw from the battle. Zhou Xian's people just couldn't eat that Heaven's chosen person's tribulation child. After 3 consecutive moves, the worryless calamity had already become solid. The dragon of Heaven's Choice was successfully retrieved. Kawa's efforts were all for naught. His heart felt empty. Kawa still didn't know what she was feeling. Failure came so suddenly, but it was also logical. If she wasn't strong enough, she couldn't rely on chess skills to make up for it. She had let down senior brother Whitebrows, carefree wandering sect, and of course, Zhou Xian's upper realm. Even in the eyes of the spectators outside, it wasn't her fault. Her response was right. Her plan was ingenious. Her decision was correct. The only mistake was that 4 Zhou Xian cultivators in a row didn't manage to eat the other party's tribulation child. At the foot of Carefree Mountain, regardless of whether it was the Carefree Orthodoxy or the other sects, countless cultivators were watching silently. This was the 5th game. It was a watershed. Once this game was lost, Zhou Xian's upper realm's resistance would inevitably become difficult. Every battle was crucial, and there was no room for maneuver. Therefore, some cultivators began to bring up the past again, complaining that Carefree Wandering's Whitebrows shouldn't have insisted on his opinion. It was precisely because of his insistence that this game was forced to start when their strength was obviously not enough. If they gave up, at least there would be a large number of elites to fill in the remaining 4 games. It would undoubtedly increase their chances of winning the later games. But now, a large number of Carefree Wandering cultivators had lost the qualification to fight again because of their failure. This was the most fatal thing. The trend would change after Zhou Xian lost the 5th game. It was only a matter of time. Yuanning's human realm was even more unbearable. The primordial spirit's immortal realm was also showing signs of defeat. The Een spirit's devil realm failed to slay the dragon. The final combination of these factors was a large number of Heaven's chosen people entering the final immortal realm and then crushing Whitebrows and the others who were still persisting. This was a foreseeable outcome. There were no mistakes and no accidents. It was just a matter of strength. But Kawa was still persisting. Even if she knew that she would lose, she would not give up the final pride of a player. She told herself that there was still a chance. There were still positions. If the opponent was careless, if there was a glimmer of hope, if the heavens opened their eyes, she would never concede defeat. This was what her chess teacher, who taught her since she was young, often lamented. It was as if she didn't know what a cool and indifferent player's mentality was. Even if a large dragon was slaughtered on the board and the gap was more than 10 points, she would still dig out, fight, and fight one palace after another, until the last chess piece with a pale face. In fact, cultivators would never be careless when playing chess. Therefore, Kawa's personality had never succeeded since she started playing chess. She had never turned the tables. She had never been blessed by the heavens. Then, in the most important game in her life, would she be able to turn the tables? No one would believe it. Unexpected miracles came from strength. And now, what the Xiaoyao Yu lacked was strength. She was still 21 points away. In chess, it was almost impossible to turn the tables by retracting the palaces. It was not a matter of retracting the palaces. In normal chess, admitting defeat in the middle of the game was the rule. If she continued to play, it would be a waste of everyone's time. But Kawa did not admit defeat. This was no longer just a game of chess. It was the honor of the Xiaoyao Yu and the future of Zhou Xian. Therefore, she continued to dig for positions. The problem was that when the game came to the end, there were not enough chess pieces. She was now fighting for a calamity. Even if she won, it would be no more than 3 or 4 points. It did not matter if the opponent gave up the position to her, but the host of Heaven's Choice was obviously very angry with this Zhou Xian player's persistence. She had no chess ethics, so she did not give in. She did not even give him a single point. She had to play even if he did not give it to her. This was Kawa's style. This was her stubborn temper. There were not many calamity materials left. There was still the position of the opponent's other large dragon. In fact, it was also a tiger's eye. If it was taken, then everything would be fine. But no matter what, it was still a calamity. The opponent could not ignore it. No matter what, she had to take it. Once again, she put her divine sense into the chessboard. Kawa felt that there were not many chess pieces left in the chessboard. She needed to use them carefully. For a chess piece that was sure to be taken, then it was better to use it as cannon fodder. Those two spies. Chapter 14:25. At the beginning of the game, she already had the intention to deal with these two people. However, because the game was not going well, her chess pieces were stretched thin, so she did not have the time. Now, with the idea of making use of trash, she was just continuing her strange way of playing chess. Aren't you a spy? Let's see how you're going to eat yourselves. With her divine sense, she ordered one of the chess pieces to pounce on the opponent's tiger eye. She thought that the spy might feign compliance and deviate from the position, but she did not expect that the spy would obediently pounce on the opponent's tiger eye. The opponent lifted the piece. He did not lift it. Instead, he was eaten. What was going on? Did a spy need to be so dedicated to acting? She really could not understand such an operation. However, since the opponent did not eat them, as the original player, she would definitely learn something. Who should she send? There seemed to be another spy. She was still very surprised that the spy obediently came to the position she designated. This was a very deadly move. If he did not eat these two pieces, the opponent's incomparably safe dragon would have no eyes. He would be sentenced to death by the heaven and earth chessboard. This script was really incomprehensible. The Heaven's Choice player began to surround and attack. His main target was the position of the two spies. Kawa took the opportunity to plunder the officials, because even now, the opponent could still survive after eliminating these two spies. However, he could not eat them. He could not lift them. In 3 consecutive moves, the Heaven's Choicing God was defeated by these two spies. Kawa immediately realized something. Her heart began to thump uncontrollably. After playing chess for thousands of years, her luck finally changed. The heavens had opened their eyes. In the most important game of chess in her life, her perseverance had paid off. She finally understood that these two people were not spies. Even spies were not like this. They must be the powerful perfected Lord Zhou Xian who had returned from afar. They dared to break through the encirclement in outer space just to rescue their home planet. By chance, they bumped into her game of chess. I'm so stupid. When the Heaven's Choice player bumped into her, if she had sent one of these two cultivators, would the result have been different? Searching for officials could not solve the fundamental problem. If he wanted to win, he had to kill this dragon. Kawa changed her mind. She picked up a piece and played it again. At this point, if the Heaven's Chosen One couldn't finish the 3 pieces, he would be in danger of being slaughtered. Of course, the current raisins were no longer single raisins. Instead, they had changed from single raisins to double raisins. Now, it was a 3-man team battle. In the future, it would become a large-scale team battle. After eating through this dragon, he had more than 30 eyes inside and out. That would be the real deal. These 2 spies, oh, they're not spies, they're wanderers returning home. They could display their strength in individual battles, but could they still stand firm in the dragon-slaying group battle? This was the final gamble. At this point, there was nothing she didn't dare to do. Have you ever heard of a gambler who doesn't dare to place a bet when he's left with his last ingot of silver? At the foot of Carefree Mountain, everyone was dumbfounded. The situation had changed once again. In the most important battlefield of true monarchs, great waves had appeared out of nowhere. If 1 or 200 true monarchs were free to attack, then the one who took the lead would be the final victor. The primordial spirits were also very important, but their numbers were too few. The Yuanying had many people, but their levels were not enough. The Battle of Yuanying in the human realm was nearing its end. Although the cultivators of Zhou Xian fought with their lives, they were still retreating. In the end, there would be 400 to 500 Yuanying who would charge into the demon realm. In the immortal realm battlefield, there were only 15 Heaven's Chosen cultivators left, and only 6 Zhou Xian cultivators were left. It was also nearing its end. And now, there was still one last dragon-slaying battle in the demon realm battlefield. There might not be enough time. Kawa's assistants shouted at the top of their lungs, asking the Yuanying and primordial spirits to hold on as long as possible. On the other hand, the Heaven's Chosen cultivators asked their own cultivators to end the battle in the demon realm as soon as possible.
Kawa was not distracted.
She only focused on holding her breath and trying to start the dragon-slaying battle as soon as possible. On the other hand, the Heaven's Chosen cultivator was trying his best to hold on until the Yuanying arrived to help. It was not that he did not have confidence in his own team of Yin Masters, but that he wanted to reduce the cost as much as possible. If there were not enough Yin Masters in the upper realm, the impact on the battle would be very limited. Everyone was rushing for time. It was just that they were rushing for different places. On the battlefield where the Heaven's Chosen cultivators were rushing, Zhou Xian was delaying. On the battlefield where Zhou Xian was rushing, the Heaven's Chosen cultivators were delaying. But on the whole, the Heaven's Chosen cultivators had the greatest chance. This was because they had the advantage on many battlefields. Even in the demon realm, where the dragon could be slaughtered, they were confident in the strength of the Heaven's Chosen Yin Masters. The dragon-slaying battle was a battle of nearly 70 people. Zhou Xian's chess pieces might not be as many as Heaven's Chosen, but they had an advantage. This was because the Zhou Xian players were considered to be better at chess. Therefore, the surrounded cultivators would be suppressed to a certain extent. This suppression was between 20% and 30%. Zhou Xian only had one chance, and that was to slay the dragon. This was what Kawa was doing. In the dragon's eye position, the Heaven's Chosen cultivator was still constantly killing those who broke through the eye to enter. Even if he could not kill them, he had to make them exhausted so that they would not be of any use in the upcoming dragon-slaying battle. But no matter how he surrounded them, the first 2 spies who entered stood firm and ensured that the dragon-slaying battle would be successful. Hold on. Hold on for another 2 hours. The dragon-slaying battle in the demon realm will immediately surround them. It will be a responsibility if you don't let a Heaven's Chosen Yuanying come up. Wait for another 2 hours. The Yin Masters will be able to cross realms to help you. Don't let the heavens chosen Yuanying cross realms to harass the Yang Master battlefield. Ancestral Master, by Mei, is already fighting 1 against 3. We can't add a few more Yuanying opponents. Kawa's assistants shouted themselves hoarse as they cheered for the human realm and immortal realm battlefield. It was in such an urgent atmosphere that the dragon-slaying battle in the demon realm began. A total of 34 black chess pieces were thrown in, and the white chess pieces surrounding the dragon and the 2 spies who broke through the eye only added up to 33 white chess pieces. This was a free-for-all battle. In a certain space of a heaven and earth chessboard, outsiders could not see it, including the players. Kawa slumped against the back of the chair. She felt that the mental effort she had put in these 10 days had even surpassed that of her upper-level true monarch. The ups and downs, the twists and turns, the torment back and forth made her feel the huge difference in mental pressure between a spectator and a real player. What should be done, she had done. What should be persevered, she had persevered. The rest could only be left to those 2 inexplicable spies.
Who could it be? Or 2? Kawa suddenly felt something.
Wasn't it 2? It was just like when she left. Looking at the solemn expressions of the surrounding cultivators and the oppressive atmosphere, Kawa's face bloomed with a bright smile. Don't worry, we'll win for sure. Chapter 1426. Everyone looked at perfected Lord Xiaojia in confusion. Was she under too much pressure that she lost her mind? While perfected Lord Xiaojia's chess skills were indeed impressive, what determined the outcome of the battle was not the chess skills, but the cultivators in the battle. Kawa looked at everyone's doubtful gazes and cracked a rare joke. 1,000 purple purples, all my assets.
Who wants to bet with me?
Kawa relaxed completely. That was because that person was back. There should be a spy from Taishan Middle Yellow as well. While she was just guessing, she was extremely confident in her guess. That was because this would satisfy the sense of ceremony and change of this guy's appearance every time. She wondered what senior brother by Mei's expression would be when he saw him. Senior brother guessed wrong. While this person was indeed a spy, at the very least he was a spy who cherished old friendships. Time passed by the seconds and minutes. The Yuanying battlefield was the first to be decided. With the efforts of the remaining Yuanying, there were less than 400 of them left. Immediately after was the Essence Spirit battlefield. There were still 9 Essence Spirit perfected lords who lasted till the end. Just as everyone thought that the situation was set for Heaven's choice, the Ein Spirit battlefield in the Fiend realm changed abruptly. The battlefield disappeared, and at the same time, less than 100 Heaven's choice Ein spirits were kicked out. The remaining 97 Zhou Xian Ein spirits held their heads high. The cultivators of the 3 realms started to cross realms at almost the same time. Yuanying ran towards the Fiend realm, Ein spirits ran towards the Immortal realm, and Essence spirits ran towards the Immortal realm. It was a race against time. Ascend to the Immortal realm directly. If we can't find Heaven's Choice's Essence spirit, we'll continue to ascend to the Immortal realm. Lu Xiaoi made the decision boldly, and the other Ein spirits did not dare to disobey. This was not only because he had won over his companions in terms of strength, but also because of his huge influence in terms of reputation. If it was someone else, they might need to talk and scheme against each other. However, right now Lu Xiaoi and Qing Xian's reputation was widespread in the upper world of Zhou Xian, and they were in the limelight. This was the true emotion of the Zhou Xian people who had been besieged for 70 years. They longed for victory, longed for a hero, longed for a savior. They were all targets of the attack, but the 5th ring had already escaped. The ones who had contributed were the 2 freaks who had returned from Zhou Xian. No one would think that they were originally from the 5th ring, and no one would think that the people they led were all cultivators chosen by the heavens. They simply thought that since these 2 people grew up in Zhou Xian, they should be considered citizens of Zhou Xian. Instead of saving their families, they went to the distant 5th ring to act as heroes. There was actually a trace of emotion in his complaints, because Zhou Xian lacked such people. When the two of them appeared in the dragon-slaying battlefield this time, most of the true monarchs were free and unfettered cultivators. There was no need to say who they would listen to. They had battle experience, and most importantly, they had the reputation of always winning. After they finished off the heaven's chosen god in the demon realm, they had two choices. Should they wait for the heaven's chosen Yuanying to appear and solve their problems before crossing the border? Or should they cross the border directly and ignore the heaven's chosen Yuanying? Lu Xiaoyi and Qing Xian both chose to cross the border directly. For them, the heaven's chosen Yuanying was only a small problem. The most important thing was how to stabilize the White Brows and the other old fellows. If everyone rushed to the divine realm to fight, they would not be at a disadvantage. A seemingly safe method was to leave some of the perfected cultivators of the Yin spirit realm to restrain the nascent soul stage cultivators. However, for Lu Xiaoyi and Qing Xian, who were used to risking their lives, this was the least desirable option. They preferred to play poker. Leave some people to restrain the Yuanying? How much? It was meaningless to leave too little, and it would increase unnecessary losses. If they left too much, they would not be a threat in the divine realm. They were in a dilemma. The key to the game was the divine realm. It was the sun god. Destroying the sun god was the only way to achieve the final victory. If they had enough Yin gods, they could pose a big enough threat. What was the point of having too many Yuanying? There was a fundamental difference in the realms, and there was a prerequisite for ants to bite an elephant to death. This was the situation that the White Brows saw. The intrusion of the 9 true monarchs of Heaven's Chosen shocked him. To be honest, taking on 3 young gods of Heaven's Chosen was almost his limit. He could not hold on anymore. The Zhou Xianyang gods were all shocked, while the Heaven's Chosen young gods were all happy. However, this feeling did not last long. Next, a large number of nearly 100 Zhou Xian Yin gods swarmed in. This time, their moods were immediately adjusted. The White Brows realized that Zhou Xian had a chance of winning. Whether or not there would be more Yuanying later, it did not matter which side they belonged to. With these 100 Yin gods, the overall situation was set. The chaos became even worse because of the more than 300 Heaven's Chosen Yuanying who entered later. However, the appearance of these people provided Lu Xiaoyi with a rare cover. He hid in the group of cultivators and silently observed the past and future of every Heaven's Chosen young god. He knew very well that the best way to break the deadlock was to kill a young god and make the Heaven's Chosen young gods feel threatened. Don't think that young gods are not afraid of death. It was just like how people looked heroic when they were young, saying that they would not be a burden to their families when they were old in the future. They would find a place to end their own lives and so on. In fact, they were just ignorant when they were young. When they were really old, they would look at them again. It was the same for young spirit cultivators. Although they had an almost immortal body, they cherished their lives very much. They used all kinds of means to hide their past and future. Rebirth seemed to no longer be an advantage, but a burden. This kind of mentality was not rare among young spirit cultivators because they were only 1 step away from immortality and 2 steps away from immortality. The more this was the case, the more they were worried about gains and losses in the face of the supreme achievement of a cultivator. In battle, they lost their original aggressive style and became conservative. They did not seek merit, but only wanted to avoid mistakes. Protecting their past and future was more important than protecting their own lives. Not every young spirit cultivator was like this, but there must be some. Lu Xiaoyi was looking for such a young god, because in the demonstration of the crow ancestor, there was a special way to deal with this kind of person. Taoist Yangqiao was one of the 3 Heaven's Chosen young gods who had attacked Bai Mei. In theory, if 3 young gods attacked one, such a battle should be very fierce and thrilling. However, on their battlefield, the battle scene was unusually calm. Some of the calm was the calm before the storm, and some of it was originally calm. Yangqiao was a cultivator who specialized in the Taishu Taoism. Since the collapse of the Tablet of the Great Way, the basic power of his country had also slowly dissipated. It was not a big deal for the great cultivators, but more middle and low-level cultivators would choose other Xiantian Dao inheritances that were still alive. It was human nature to strive for greater heights and for water to flow to lower places. It was precisely because the foundation was not there that the cultivators of the Taishu lineage did not find it so difficult to compete for the general trend. Especially for the great cultivators of their realm, how to survive until the end of the era was more important than how to compete in the general trend of the universe. There were still thousands of years to go. By then, there might not be any serious inheritance in the Yuan kingdom. Who would he fight for now? Chapter 1427. With such a mentality, although Yang Chong had come to participate in this expedition against Zhou Xian, it was really hard to say how much effort he could put into it. Furthermore, his Tao orthodoxy was that of the Great Void. Hence, he fought very slowly. The battle between cultivators could not be compared with the anxious and pale faces of mortals. In many cases, it was normal for the winner to be happy and the loser to be happy. It was hard to imagine that two old fellows, who had lived for thousands of years and had thousands of years to live in the future, would give up their thousands of years of achievements and limitless possibilities because of some disagreement. The higher the realm, the different the thoughts. It was difficult to find a reason that could make them fight to the death with each other. In most cases, they had a tacit understanding with each other. This was the normal state of the cultivation world. Yang Chong was like this, and the other two young gods with him were not much stronger. The low-level cultivators fought to the death under the righteousness of the realm, but who knew that the upper-level cultivators were flirting with each other? Playing typing boxing? Of course, if you showed that you were weak, these people would definitely not let you go easily, but if you made them feel that you were very troublesome, it would be another matter. It was very naive to describe the relationship between these great cultivators as a life-and-death struggle. Bai Mei was very powerful. In the face of such an opponent, as a yang spirit cultivator, no one dared to provoke his bottom line. This was the way to get along with each other. But Lu Xiaoi was not a yang god. In his eyes, although the battle between the yang spirits in the divine realm was very fierce, since they came in, many of the Yuanying spirits and primordial spirits had died. Only the existence of the main body, the 16 yang spirits, had not been reborn. What he didn't know was that the truth was that since they entered the chessboard of heaven and earth, these yang gods had not been reborn even once. It seemed that the yang gods had pushed the key to victory and defeat to the bottom. But you couldn't really think that the battle between the yang gods was ordinary. Especially as the actual controller of the carefree travel, Bai Mei was arrogant and still wanted to do something. He had a reason to do something. There was a huge mountain gate behind him, countless disciples were going through the test of life and death, his hometown behind him, and so on. However, White Brows was cunning. If he didn't attack the present, he would attack the past and the future. This was the exact opposite of the three Qins of Shenyuan. The purpose of the three Qin dynasties was to kill you and make you suffer so much that you wished you were dead. Then, they would discover the secrets of your past and future. White Brows, on the other hand, left you in the modern world to judge your past and future. It couldn't be said that one philosophy was correct and the other was wrong. In fact, they were all right. As a genuine Shenyuan swordsman, San Qin was extremely powerful in this world. Naturally, he had to play to his strengths and avoid his weaknesses. He used his powerful strength in this world to force out his opponent's past and future. Similarly, as an orthodox Taoist, the White Brow's strength lay in analyzing the past and future of others. In the present world, he did not have the ability to destroy everything. Therefore, he should first figure out the past and future of his opponents. Finally, he could make a sudden and ruthless move at a certain time. Lu Xiaoi learned everything. He also had some foundation in carefree travel. He even had a deep discussion with White Brows on severing 3 lives. In his opinion, there was no severing 3 lives that was the best. There was only one that was most suitable for you. Therefore, He could roughly see the past and future of White Brow's three opponents. This was also a method that saved a lot of effort. Severing the past and future did not require as much effort as severing the present. Using White Brow's words, the swordsman's method was just foolishness. It looked powerful, but the efficiency was extremely low. Thinking about it carefully, it actually made some sense. When learning, one must not solidify one's thinking. One should not think that one was the best in the world and that one's sect was the best. One should be good at listening, especially to the opinions of other mainstream orthodoxies that were not so good. In White Brow's trial of severing 3 lives, he also discovered some very interesting things. For example, Xuanyuan's severing 3 lives relied on severing the present to find the rebirth point of the past and future. This was a direction. However, White Brow's ability could occasionally sever the past and future of 3 young gods chosen by heaven. Similarly, when a cultivator's past and future were severed, he also needed to find a basic point in the present to rebirth the past and future. The 3 lives were originally complementary to each other. If one was gone, the other 2 would be responsible for making up for the lack of rebirth. The past could make up for the present could make up for the future, and the future could make up for the past. Therefore, one could find a lot of interesting things. It was like the reference point of Yang Kuang's appearance. In fact, it was also the most important point of his appearance. The key was only relative. It referred to the fact that if this place was damaged, it might lose its appearance. However, cultivators were very cautious about this defense. If it was a swordsman like the 3 Qin, it was not important whether they knew this point or not. Because even if they did not know, with the attack power of the Yang God swordsman, they could achieve their goals in other ways. But for Lu Xiaoyi, it was very important, because he still did not have the attack power of the Crow ancestor, the Lu ancestor, and the 3 Qin when they were Yang gods. From observing the battle between different Yang gods to finally determining the 3 opponents of White Brows, it had only been a short moment. The heavy burden of commanding the Yin gods in battle was on Qing Xian's shoulders. The 2 of them had a tacit understanding. Lu Xiaoyi knew that he would definitely be able to do it, just as Qing Xian knew that he would open a gap in the Yang god. Hurry up. I'm under a lot of pressure here. The primordial spirit cultivators are easy to deal with, but the Yuanying group of Heaven's Choice is really a bit too many, and it's not easy to deal with them. If you can't kill the Yang god, then you might as well come back and help me, and make it easier for me. Qing Xian was an orthodox Taoist. He was usually courteous and elegant. However, as long as he was with this guy, he would unnaturally want to swear. He said that if he joined the battle of the Yin gods, with the strength of the swordsman, he would quickly gain an advantage over the primordial spirit of Heaven's Choice. Then, he would be free to deal with the Yuanying. Although the time would definitely be slower, it would be safer. But this person did not want to. He insisted on provoking the Yang god to take a shortcut. Of course, there was a hint of jealousy in Qing Xian's dissatisfaction. For example, he did not have the ability to accurately predict a person's 3 lives. He did not know where this grandson had learned this ability. Was it the Sword Dao tablet? It must be. Their ancestors liked to cut people's 3 lives, and this had a deep historical inheritance. Lu Xiaoyi did not hide it. The Yang gods here are not easy to kill. They are all top experts of Heaven's Choice. Later, before we make a move, you have to come and help. The 2 of us together will let you have the fun of cutting the Yang gods' 3 lives. Qing Xian was very interested. This guy was finally tactful. He even knew that there was meat for everyone to eat together. He did not forget about him. Okay, tell me his past and future. Which one should I cut? Lu Xiaoyi laughed. Cutting the hair's past and future. That's the white-browed old man's problem. The 2 of us can't do it. I'm talking about cutting the present world. Our old profession. Chapter 1428. The battlefield was extremely chaotic, and no one could see what was going on for a while. There were often Jinjuan sneak attacks on the Yang spirit. Whether it was Zhou Xian's Yin spirit attacking the Yang spirit of Heaven's Choice, or the primordial spirit greeting Zhou Xian's Yang spirit, Lu Xiaoyi was not the only one who wanted to kill the Yang spirit and end the game. There were also many who knew how to read the three lives, but it was hard to say whether they could understand it or not. Everyone's pressure increased. In this chaotic battlefield, the most dangerous ones were the Yuanying of Heaven's Choice. After all, there was a qualitative difference in the realm. In the sky full of Jinjuan, if they were not careful and were hit by the spells of the Yang spirit, it would be a tragic end. They could only target the Yin spirit of Zhou Xian, who is slightly stronger than them. However, under the instructions of Qing Xian, the Yin spirits did not try to fight them head-on. Instead, they took them to wander in the battlefield of the Yang spirit. When everyone was in danger, the difference in perception and vision of the Yuanying cultivators was revealed. They were often killed by mistake and died at the hands of the large-scale spells of their own Yang spirit. This was the result of not having a high realm, but still having to fight. Lu Xiaoyi's idea was not necessarily to involve Qing Xian. The reason why he did this was that Bai Mei's opponent was 3 people, not 1. If he made a move, it would inevitably lead to the counterattack of the other 2 Yang spirits. No matter how confident he was, he did not want to put himself in such a dangerous situation. Therefore, cooperation was the way to go. There was only one chance, and that was when Bai Mei attacked Yang Yi. He could clearly feel that among the 3 Yang spirits of Bai Mei, he had a special liking for Yang Yi. This was a feeling that stemmed from his understanding of the Xiaoyao 3 lives spell. The beginning of the change came from the sneak attack of the 3 Xiaoyao Yin spirits. Every Xiaoyao Yin spirit felt that they had the responsibility to share the pressure of their own sex ancestor Bai Mei, so they had always been harassing him. This time, the 3 Yin spirits were very smart to use a kind of secret formation of Xiaoyao travel, the heavenly wheel of freedom. The profundity of this move was that once the array was out, Patriarch Whitebrows could take over from it. There was no problem of cooperation. The old white-browed old man was very shrewd and ruthless. He made full use of the help of his disciples this time. When the heavenly wheel rotated, everyone was in a trance. They could only guard their minds and stabilize themselves. In just a few breaths of time, he had won the opportunity to kill Yang Yan alone. He had been watching Yang Liang's 3 lives for a very long time. Among the 3 Yang spirits, the number of times he had cut the past and future was actually the least for Yang Chang. What was real was fake, and what was fake was real. Although he had cut the least, he was the one who could see the clearest. This was the special feature of the free wandering 3 lives technique. With a flick of his finger, the carefree rebirth technique could be used to cut through the past and the future. Cutting through the past and the future did not require a powerful technique. The key was the mysterious technique. One had to be able to see it accurately and keep up with it mentally. This was the strength of the carefree travel orthodoxy. The most difficult thing for him was to slash the manifestation realm. The carefree travel orthodoxy was the same as all the orthodox Taoists. In terms of technique, they often did not pursue extreme evil and hysteria. They believed that this was not the essence of Taoism. The inch white ray was the most magical technique he had cultivated. It was also one of the few methods he was confident in breaking Yang Chang's defense. It was precisely because there were not many effective attacks in the manifestation realm that he had not put in much effort in the manifestation realm. He was also afraid that others would see the real situation and have a countermeasure. As soon as the white ray appeared, his wish was fulfilled. The qi entered his body. Almost at the same time, the carefree rebirth technique also attacked Yang Chang's past and future. The white-browed old man was confident. After more than 10 days of careful observation, he was confident that he could catch the truth of Yang Chang's past and future projection, but the manifestation realm that he was most worried about still had an accident. As a master of the Great Void, Yang Chang's emptiness realm attacks were all displayed on the outside, while his hidden emptiness realm was hidden deep within his body. The inch of white light was indeed very sharp and had broken through all of Yang Chang's external defenses. However, once it pierced into Yang Chang's body, it became silent and lost. The manifestation realm had failed. The white-browed old man had a feeling. If he missed this opportunity, it would be difficult to find another one. Just as the inch white ray appeared, two figures flashed into battle. One of them had a clear chi that surrounded Yang Chang in an instant. However, this kind of power was not enough to be fatal. It could be resisted by the Yang spirit. They were all from the same origin of Taoism. The three pure chi was no stranger to every Taoist Vedanta. There was only a bit of gray light in the clear air. It wasn't particularly conspicuous, but it was very ordinary. However, this ordinary light penetrated into Yang Liang's body like an inch of white light. What made him even more frightened was that it wasn't confused by his secret of the void realm. Instead, it directly rushed towards one point. It was the reference point that Yang Chang used to reproduce the past and future. Killing the reference point was the technique that the Crow ancestor and the Lu ancestor had shown several times in the sword Tao Steel. It was not effective for all Yang spirit cultivators, but it was especially effective for cultivators who played with the manifestation realm, used illusions, and walked the path of dexterity. With a muffled groan, Yang Chang's 3 lives were cut at the same time. He would never have thought that he, who seemed to be the safest among the 3, would become the first Yang spirit to be annihilated. Before his Tao dissipated, he quietly watched as the 2 Yin deities scurried out of the room. The one who released the clear chi was just a smokescreen, for the sake of escaping now. The one who really did it was the flying sword. Swordsman. How could he have forgotten about them? The 2 bad seeds ran away after killing because the attacks of the other 2 Yang spirits would arrive soon. The so-called 3 pure chi of Qing Xian could only buy them a breath of time. At this time, there was only one person who could really help them. White Eyebrows. Old White Eyebrows had not communicated with them before, but he was very experienced and knew very well what he should do now. Stop them with the methods of the present world? There might not be enough time, and it was not his strength. What was his strength? It was still watching the 3 lives. Therefore, he still had to kill the 3 lives. Killing the 3 lives of these 2 Yang spirits was the most threatening thing he could do at the moment. It was not right to use a dagger to block the opponent's spear and broadsword. The right way to do it was to rub the body and stab. Of course, he still needed the cooperation of the 2 little Yin spirits. He was not worried about this because the 2 little guys had already shown extraordinary judgment in the surprise attack just now. Sure enough, the 2 retreating people did not blindly run away. As the 2 of them were escaping, they suddenly separated and turned around. Lu Xiaoyi's flying sword shot out, and Qing Xian's rainbow pierced the sun. He was going to confront the 2 Yang spirits. Should he fight? Should he fight? That was the question. For the 2 Yang gods, if they won, they would just take the lives of 2 Yin gods and avenge Yang Chang, whom they were not very familiar with. If they lost, thousands of years of cultivation would be lost. They would no longer have anything to do with the change of the era. Yang Chang's example was still there. What choice did they have to make? Chapter 1429. P.S. Fruit wanted to read 2 chapters at 11 o'clock, so I added it. It's the last draft. Fortunately, tomorrow is a new month, so I don't have to fight for this or that. I can have a good rest and relax. This month is a little tiring. Next month, don't rush me. I really have to think about the plot. I updated too quickly this month, and the quality has dropped a little. I'm sorry, everyone. Give Sloth a relaxed environment, and Sloth also hopes to contribute more wonderful works. Thank you to Orange Fruit. Thank you to all the friends who helped me. Thank you. The Yang God of Heaven's choice died. The appearance of this situation was far more shocking than the death of hundreds of Yuanying immortals. Because the Yang God could be reborn. In the previous 4 games, There had never been a situation where a young god died. Regardless of whether it was Zhou Xian who had failed 4 times or Tianzi who had failed 5 times, the yang spirits were all slacking at the level of the divine realm. Occasionally, they would be killed, but they would be reborn. No one dared to force the other into a corner. Only after the outcome of the battle in the lower 3 realms was decided would the disciples and grand disciples rush up. Only then would the side with more people win the final victory, and the side with younger disciples who failed to live up to expectations would leave in dejection. However, there would be no situation where a few young gods would rather die than surrender. Cultivators would never retreat in front of the great Tao in life, but they would not be aimless and brainless. After all, their sect's orthodoxy was not dead yet, was it? They were not like the great Buddhas of the big and small intestines who had no way out. This was what Lu Xiaoyi had said. In terms of cruelty, the battle in the field was far crueler than the battle in Zhou Xian. Yang Liang was the first. This meant that there was a peak existence among the Zhou Xianying gods who could easily sever a person's life. Considering that the white-browed god had done it while fighting against 3 people at the same time, the significance of this was quite terrifying. The remaining 8 yang gods began to communicate with each other through their divine senses and began to have the intention to retreat. At the yang god level, they were under a fatal threat. Among the disciples below, Heaven's Choice also did not have an advantage, and the situation was even getting worse. The strength of nearly 100 Zhou Xianying gods was much stronger than several primordial spirits of Heaven's Choice and 300 Yuanying immortals. There was no point in fighting such a battle. They would only become more and more passive. Xiaoyao Mountain became a sea of joy. No one had thought that the game of chess, which originally had little hope, would be played like this by the Xiaoyao cultivators. There were many things that were thought-provoking. The focus of the turning point was the Xiaorao cultivators' sea. That last stroke of hers was a stroke of genius. What kind of courage and judgment did it take to hide the strongest chess piece at the very end of the most crucial moment? Jia Hua's face was flushed red as she was surrounded by her assistants. She went out with everyone to welcome the returning heroes. Of course, this included those nascent soul cultivators who had given their all even though they had failed. Victory belonged to everyone, not to a single person or a group of people. At the very least, they had to adhere to this concept in their propaganda. The chessboard of heaven and earth dissipated, and the next battle would take place in a month. Whether it was the cultivators who had just come out or those who had already lost, the first thing they did after their joy was to ask around about their friends, fellow disciples. They wanted to know who had died in the battle and who had survived by luck. Among the excitement, there was also a faint sadness. This was not the end. In the future, they would have to experience this scene many times. Either Zhou Xian continued to stand tall, or the world would change. Lu Xiaoyi and Qing Xian did not say anything. The two of them, who were used to big scenes, no longer took these empty titles seriously. It was just a game of chess. The number of people was limited, and the tragedy was even more limited. Compared to the death battle between tens of thousands of cultivators in the blue sky, it was not on the same level. The two of them pretended not to know who killed Yang Chang. If Bai Mei did not say anything, they would not say anything. In fact, Bai Mei really would not say anything. This was not to take credit, but to put the blame on him. It would make the Heaven's Choice more afraid, and it would also save the two little guys a lot of unnecessary trouble. This was the responsibility of an elder. Even the two young gods who knew the truth might not say anything because it was not nice to be killed by a sneak attack by a Yin god. What were the two of them doing? It was fine that they did not help Yang Chang, but why didn't they take revenge in the end? If they could not stand up to scrutiny, they might as well pretend to be stupid. In the chaos, Lu Xiaoyi saw Kawa, who was smiling like a flower in the chaos. He opened his arms and hugged her. Of course, he hugged nothing, but he could not avoid the man's big hands holding the woman's hands tightly and shaking them. Qing Xian curled her lips to show her disdain. Those who had attended the party organized by Kawa suddenly realized that the little Yuanying did not lie to them. At first glance, they saw the woman's face full of rejection, and then looked at the fierce man's posture of wanting to force himself on her. Alas, people's hearts are not what they used to be, and the world is deteriorating day by day. What else can they do? As the little Yuanying said, other than pretending not to see, what else can you do? Senior sister, aren't you too cruel? You're just pushing me into a pit of fire. It was dark all around. Fortunately, I was lucky. Otherwise, wouldn't you be alone for the rest of your life? Kawa snorted coldly. You deserve it. Who asked you to be so used to being a spy that you can't get rid of the smell of a traitor? Well, since your performance is not bad, I will set up a table to entertain you and your friends in the evening. Lu Xiaoyi objected. Just me. He is not my friend, and he never drinks or feasts. Standing on top of Mount Xiaoyao and drinking the wind is enough. Qing Xian interrupted. I don't drink other people's wine, but I must drink Fairy Jia's wine. Different from when they were in the blue sky realm, the two of them kept a low profile here. They did not mention their role in turning the situation around in the chess game. Apart from a few Yin masters who knew about it, they hid themselves deeply. The two of them realized that this was a difficult race. The end was the change of the era, and the time was thousands of years. During this process, survival was the way to go, and not recklessly standing at the top without any safety rope. The hustle and bustle of Mount Xiaoyao continued. This was not something that could be finished in a day or two. Many cultivators were celebrating their victory, many survivors were licking their wounds, and many were reminiscing about their lost faces. This was destined to be a sleepless night. In Jiahua's cave abode, there was a table full of medicinal dishes and the sweetest immortal wine. All of these were the handiwork of true monarch Greater and Lesser Jia, and they were the rewards that the victors deserved. They talked about the beautiful scenery of the blue sky realm, the interesting stories of the Five Rings, and the difficult and flawed life of a spy. However, they did not talk about the war. The more they talked about the war, the heavier it became. More and more people reminisced about it, but fewer and fewer people could sit together. When the wine was drunk, another uninvited guest came. Bai Mei barged in with the wine in his hand. Looking at senior sister Jia, who was still somewhat restrained, he could not help but laugh. Sit, sit. I am not a senior brother today, nor am I a sun god. I am just an ordinary, carefree old man who freeloads on food and drinks. There is no need to be so particular. Look at those two brats. They're not even moving. They don't look like they are meeting an elder. They look like they are meeting an old servant who has come to deliver wine. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.